Hey everyone, welcome back. Chapters 1301 through 1320 of the previous episode. After securing the Grand Primordium Origin Stone and escaping the Grand Emperor's grasp, Qinmu returns to eternal peace to prepare for the final stages of his reform. The Celestial Venerables remain entangled in a power struggle, with the Grand Emperor actively manipulating them from the shadows. Qinmu, having mastered the Great Celestial Heavens technique, and refined his understanding of the Tao through the Grand Extremes and Grand Beginning Stones, becomes a formidable match for the Celestial Venerables. In the Great Void, the war between the Celestial Heavens and the Masters of Creation reaches a breaking point. Founding Emperor Qin Yi and Divine King Lang will mount a desperate defense against the encroaching Celestial Heavens armies. Qinmu arrives to support them, using his advanced divine arts and the power of the Glassy Sky Pagoda to turn the tide. The conflict culminates in a brutal confrontation, where the Celestial Venerables are forced to confront the Grand Emperor's true nature. Qinmu outmaneuvers his enemies, trapping the Grand Emperor and securing a fragile victory for the human race and his allies. The era ends with the Celestial Heavens in disarray, and Qinmu positioning eternal peace and the ancestral court as the foundation for a new, independent future. If you're able to, please support me on PayPal to help me stay active. Thank you. Now let's get back to the story of Tales of Hurting Gods audio series. Chapter 1321. Just as Emperor Tai's head was about to struggle and escape, the ground around him suddenly began to move. Loud bangs rang out as the ground began to rise, forming 5 mineral veins. One of the mineral veins was filled with the dense aura of the absolute beginning Tao. One of the mineral veins was filled with the entanglement of yin and yang qi. One of the mineral veins was filled with the transformation of the form and quality of the Tao of Tai Su. And one of the mineral veins was filled with the mountain range of the Tao of Tai Shi, which had also transformed into a formless void mountain. Only the last mountain range didn't have any aura of great Tao, even though it was bulging. 4 of the 5 mind veins pressed down on Supreme Emperor's head, and 4 different great Tao invaded his body to suppress his divine consciousness and imprint the seals of the 4 innate great Tao on it. Supreme Emperor's divine consciousness was instantly locked, and he couldn't move it anymore. However, he laughed out loud. Heavenly Venerate him, you. Is your algebra taught by martial battle, Heavenly Teacher? There are clearly only 4 mind veins, yet you say it's 5 mine. Qinmu's face turned black. He had never comprehended the path of great change, so he naturally couldn't use it to seal Supreme Emperor. The reason why he said it was the Great Seal of 5 mineral veins was because there were 5 mineral veins in the ancestral court. Suddenly, he grunted and blood spurted out from his eyes, ears, mouth and nose. The wounds on his body exploded one after another, and blood spurted out in all directions. Supreme Emperor struggled with all his might to gather his messy divine consciousness in an attempt to break his seal. When he saw this, he couldn't help laughing out loud and mocked. Heavenly Emperor Mu, you have indeed sealed me, but what can you do? Your injuries are even worse than mine. Qinmu's expression became gloomier and gloomier. He trembled as he took out a small basket. Inside was the spirit pills Apothecary had refined for him. That night, when the strong practitioners of the previous era had invaded, Apothecary had specially refined a basket of spirit pills. Qinmu and the rest hadn't finished using them, so there were still some left in the basket. He had kept them in case they needed them. Supreme Emperor's divine consciousness couldn't be condensed at all. His head tried to escape in all directions, but it was sealed by the 4 minds and became smaller and smaller. The pressure around him also became heavier and heavier, making it impossible for him to escape. He still smiled at himself. Qin, it's already amazing that you can do this, but it's a pity that you can't kill me and can only suppress me. As long as I exhaust you to death, I'll still be the winner. Qinmu continued to refine the medicinal energy and didn't say a word. Supreme Emperor smiled. So what if Heavenly Venerate Yun killed me? After his death, his primordial spirit was still thrown into the ultimate void by me and suppressed in my divine consciousness, great overarching heaven. So what if Heavenly Venerate Ling restrains me? She was still killed by me and sealed in the Heavenly River. Heavenly Venerate Mu, you will also end up in the same situation. Qinmu catalyzed the medicinal energy to suppress his injuries before he let out a sigh of relief. Supreme Emperor's head had already been refined to the size of a fence by the 4 veins, and the 4 veins also became smaller and smaller. Qin Mu executed the broken sword and cut the ground in all directions, turning it into a disc. He then injected some primordial symbols into it to change the physical structure of the breathing soil, and refine the four or veins into a huge seal that was more than 3 yards in circumference. There were 4 dragon-shaped mountains on this treasure seal, and in the middle of the 4 dragon-shaped mountains was the head of Supreme Emperor. It was like a bead that had been trapped by the mouths of the 4 dragons. Of course, the bead wasn't round. This treasure seal was still too big, and Qin Mu tried to use his magic power to refine it into a smaller size. However, his injuries were too severe, so he could only give up. If he allowed the seal of the 4 mines to continue refining, the treasure seal should slowly shrink. Supreme Emperor's head was in the center of the treasure seal, unable to escape. You should know that I have the identity of Shuang Heaven Consort and the imprint of the Divine Consciousness Tao Fruit on Great Overarching Heaven, so you should know that it's completely useless for you to seal me. You think Shuang Heaven Consort won't kill you? You think my Tao Fruit imprint will let you go? You are just another booty that I'm about to reap. Qin Mu tidied his clothes and took out a mirror to look at his face. He carefully washed away the bloodstains on his face and checked his wound to make sure that there wouldn't be any scars. Supreme Emperor looked at him and sneered. I won't kill you directly. I will torture you slowly and let you taste all the pain in the world. I will make you beg for death. Qin Mu took out a comb and combed his messy hair in front of the mirror. After he was done, he looked at the mirror a few more times and didn't find anything wrong with it. Only then did he put away the mirror and comb. Supreme Emperor didn't speak anymore. He looked at Qin Mu rinsing his mouth and cleaning up the blood in his mouth. Only then did Qin Mu turn around to look at him. He stretched out his hand and grabbed Supreme Emperor's head in the middle of the treasure seal. Supreme Emperor's expression was gloomy as he said coldly, Heavenly Venerate Mu, are you sure you want to do this? Qin Mu had already grabbed his head and lifted the treasure seal. Supreme Emperor snorted angrily. You can refine my head into a divine weapon, but you have to wipe out my divine consciousness first. A warrior can be killed but not humiliated. If you wipe out my divine consciousness, my corpse will be at your mercy. Qin Mu laughed loudly and put down the treasure seal. Supreme Emperor's head rolled around in the seal of the 4 mines, and his long hair curled up again. He sneered. At least you know what's good for you. Heavenly Venerate Mu, tell me, what do you want? Qin Mu said amiably, Heavenly Venerate Yun's soul. As long as you give me Heavenly Venerate Yun's soul, I'll let you go, and you won't have to suffer such humiliation. Impossible. Supreme Emperor's head said resolutely, Heavenly Venerate Yun's soul was sent into the ultimate void by me and trapped in great overarching heaven. If I let him out and you have his corporeal body, wouldn't he have to be revived? One of you is already a headache, so there's no way I can let Heavenly Venerate Yun out again. Furthermore, my head isn't as valuable as Heavenly Venerate Yun's. Change to another condition. Qin Mu frowned slightly and pondered for a moment. Supreme Emperor, your head is still very valuable. He probed. You are revered as the strongest corporeal body in prehistoric times. I've heard many creators say that even Heavenly Venerate's primordial corporeal body is inferior to yours. You only have this head left now. If you keep this head, as long as you find the absolute beginning original stone, you can still reforge your body. Aren't you going to consider it? The Supreme Emperor shook his head. Even if I find the absolute beginning original stone and reforge my body will still not be as strong as my original body. I will never be able to find hundreds of millions of creators to worship me, and I will never be able to return to my peak state. If Heavenly Venerate Haotian did not destroy my head and cut off one of my arms, how could I have been injured to this extent by the 4th Heavenly Venerate? His head was created using the primordial stone, not his original body. His original head had already been destroyed and refined by Heavenly Venerate Haotian during the Great Void Battle. His new head could not match up to his original head. Supreme Emperor continued, Furthermore, even if I can recover to my peak condition, I'm not the strongest corporeal body. Heavenly Emperor Absolute Beginning's corporeal body is still a notch stronger than mine. Qin Mu's heart trembled slightly. Heavenly Emperor Absolute Beginning and Supreme Emperor both had the title of the strongest corporeal body, but there was still no conclusion as to who was stronger. As for Supreme Emperor, Even though the creators were gnashing their teeth in hatred, they all agreed that Supreme Emperor's corporeal body was the strongest in history. Heavenly Emperor Absolute Beginning's corporeal body was the strongest corporeal body recognized by all the celestial venerables in Dragon City. It was difficult to determine which of the two sacred corporeal bodies was stronger. And now that Supreme Emperor had admitted that Heavenly Emperor Absolute Beginning's corporeal body was stronger, they had finally solved an unsolved case. Since you won't release Heavenly Emperor Yun's soul, let's exchange for Heavenly Emperor Ling. Qinmu smiled and said, when I saved Heavenly Venerate Ling, you let me save Heavenly Venerate Ling. Supreme Emperor's head laughed loudly. Heavenly Venerate Yun is dead after all. Even if she was saved by you, it would still take a few years for her to cultivate to the level of fighting against 10 Heavenly Venerates. After Heavenly Venerate Ling was saved by you, her battle prowess was enough to fight against 10 Heavenly Venerates. Heavenly Venerate Mu, your plan is too good, but I'm not stupid either. Qinmu was furious and grabbed Supreme Emperor's head to lift the huge seal. He executed it and struck out. Qin, you humiliated me, you're dead meat. In the cry of Supreme Emperor, the treasure seal spun and flew up. The treasure light blossomed, and Supreme Emperor's head let out a muffled grunt. His divine consciousness couldn't help being activated, and all sorts of strange Tao markings appeared on the surface of the seal. Boom! Qinmu's strike caused the mountains to collapse and the earth to crack. Supreme Emperor's head only felt his divine consciousness turning into the energy in the treasure seal. Qinmu didn't use his cultivation in this strike, but only activated the seal of the four minds. It was the four minds that had absorbed his energy and turned it into power. You motherf asterisk cur. You've refined me into a treasure. Supreme Emperor's head cursed loudly, but when he saw Qinmu executing the treasure seal again, he immediately said, Heavenly Venerate Mu, let's discuss this. Qinmu stopped and called back the treasure seal. He said with a pleasant expression, Tao brother, don't you want to consider the matter between Heavenly Venerate Yun and Heavenly Venerate Ling again? The expression of Supreme Emperor's head fluctuated as he said dispiritedly, I've really fallen. However, I definitely can't hand Heavenly Venerate Yun and Heavenly Venerate Ling to you, but we can still discuss some other things. Qinmu made a gesture to activate the treasure seal. Supreme Emperor immediately said, Stop! This head of mine was indeed not worth anything. It was only visualized using primordial stones, and it couldn't compare to Heavenly Venerate Yun's soul, or Heavenly Venerate Ling's life. No matter how much you humiliate me, I won't exchange with you. We can exchange for something else. Qinmu stopped. What else can you exchange for? He asked suspiciously. Taoist brother Supreme Emperor, it's not that I look down on you, but to be honest, I occupy the biggest treasure land of the ancestral court and have 100,000 black mountains. They are rich in minerals and resources. Moreover, I have a deal with Celestial Master Gong and concubine Yen Tian. To be honest, I don't care about the little output in your territory at all. If you want to trade with the treasures in concubine Yang Tian's territory, you'd better keep your mouth shut. The head of Tai Di sneered and said, Your Great Black Mountain is also a treasure land? If you tell others, they'll laugh their heads off. Celestial Master Mu, your Great Black Mountain is a place that even the 10 Celestial Masters don't care about, which means you treat it as a treasure. My territory in the Ancestral Court is also a treasure land, which is many times better than your Great Black Mountain. It's a place where murderous aura is condensed. Of course, I won't exchange with you. Qinmu's heart moved slightly and he asked humbly, What's so special about the place where murderous aura is condensed that concubine Qing Tian occupied? Supreme Emperor smiled. Nothing else, it's just a natural god execution stage in the Ancestral Court. Qinmu's heart pounded violently, and he asked in a hoarse voice, Natural god execution platform? Heavenly Venerate Mu, you're still too young. Supreme Emperor chuckled. My treasured land is a natural god execution platform, and Divine Emperor Lang Xian's treasured land is the natural Jade Lake Saint Realm in the Ancestral Court. Other than that, there are other treasured lands in the Ancestral Court that correspond to the 4 Great Heaven Gates, thousands of palaces, and even Jade Capital Saint City. Even Sky-bearing Gate could be found in the Ancestral Court. Have you realized something? Qinmu's heart trembled and he cried out, You mean there's a heavenly court from the immemorial era in the Ancestral Court? Wrong. It's not a heavenly court from the immemorial era. Supreme Emperor said calmly. It should be said that the heavenly courts of the later generations were built according to the specifications of the treasured lands in the ancestral court from the immemorial era. When absolute beginning and those ancient gods built the heavenly courts, it could be said that they had practically copied the treasured lands of the ancestral court. The Jade Lake corresponded to the ancestral court's Jade Lake, the heavenly gate corresponded to the heavenly gate of the ancestral court, and God execution stage also imitated the God execution stage of the ancestral court. Now you should know why the heavenly palace realm is very important, right? Qin Mu's mind went blank. Heavenly palace realm was created by Celestial Emperor, and when he created the heavenly palace realm, the later generations would cultivate according to the 7 realms of heavenly palace, and they would naturally obtain powerful abilities. Where did this ability come from? Why did their strength increase greatly with each step they took in the heavenly palace? Why did the gods have to pass through the god-slaying platform when they cultivated to a certain realm? If the Longhan heavenly court was arranged according to the geography of the ancestral court, then it could be explained. Apart from the 5 great primordial mineral veins in the ancestral court, there were other treasured lands such as the South Heaven's Gate Jade Lake. The heavenly court was built according to the specifications of these treasured lands. The Longhan heavenly court had originally inherited the great Tao of the ancestral court. When the gods cultivated to the realm of South Heaven Gate, it was equivalent to the process of passing through South Heaven Gate and obtaining the Tao in the ancestral court. They would naturally obtain the corresponding power. Qin Mu composed himself and suddenly asked, "Then what exactly is Taoist Supreme Emperor planning to exchange with me?" "The location of Jade Capital's sacred city." Supreme Emperor said solemnly, "God execution platform is already my territory, so I definitely won't give this place to you. However, I can tell you the location of Jade Capital's sacred city. This Jade Capital's sacred city is much better than your Great Black Mountain. If you obtain this treasured land, you will soar to great heights in the future and become the heavenly emperor." Qin Mu burst out laughing, and his laughter became louder and louder. Supreme Emperor's head said coldly, "What are you laughing at?" Qin Mu laughed loudly. He shook his head. "Supreme Emperor, do you take me as a 3-year-old child? Let me tell you, I'm already 16 years old. If Jade Capital's sacred city was truly a supreme treasure ground, how could you not occupy it? How could Heavenly Venerate Shao, Heavenly Concubine Yen, and Heavenly Venerate Gong not occupy it? They were also people who had obtained the secrets of the ancestral court, so they knew no less than you." The corners of his mouth rose. "You should indeed know the whereabouts of the ancestral court's Jade Capital's sacred city," he said indifferently. "However, even Heavenly Venerate would find it difficult to set foot in that place. It's even more dangerous than the 5 great mineral veins. You used this information to trick me into sending myself to my death." Supreme Emperor's head was silent for a moment before he sighed. "You guessed it right. The ancestral court's Jade Capital's sacred city is indeed a forbidden land, a forbidden zone. When I was still Supreme Emperor, I had once led the strongest ancient gods to explore that place, but they knew it was difficult and retreated." Qin Mu asked, "Which ancient gods did you lead?" "Heavenly Emperor Absolute Beginning, Earth Mother Primordial Lord, and North Emperor Black Tortoise. Apart from them there were also Boyang Shujun and Gong Gong. They also led the other 3 ancient gods and emperors to explore that place together." Supreme Emperor was silent for a moment. "We didn't manage to explore that place completely, and only explored the periphery. In the end, we had no choice but to retreat and leave. How about this, Celestial Master Mu? I will tell you the location of the sacred city of Jade Capital. I will allow you to enter my god-slaying platform once more, and you will let me leave," he said patiently. "You have to know that the benefits you get from experiencing the god-slaying platform in your heavenly palace are only 1/10 of the real god-slaying platform. And the god-slaying platform in my heavenly palace is the real god-slaying platform. As long as you can go through the experience of my god execution stage, the benefits." Qin Mu was greatly moved and hesitated for a moment before gritting his teeth. "Give me the location of Jade Capital's sacred city first." "How difficult is that?" Supreme Emperor directly used his divine consciousness to transmit the location of Jade Capital's sacred city to his mind. "Ever since we failed the last time, we sealed that place. Even if you find that place, you won't be able to find the sacred city of Jade Capital without the ancient god and creator who set up the seal to lead the way. Furthermore, you mustn't run over there by yourself. You must suppress your curiosity. The dangers there are unimaginable to you. The more he said this, the more curious Qin Mu became. He felt as if there were thousands of little vixens like Hu Linger living in his heart. They were using their tails to scratch his heart and it was getting itchier and itchier. A smile appeared on Supreme Emperor's head. As the Supreme Emperor with unparalleled divine consciousness, he had long seen through Qin Mu's weakness. It wasn't just Qin Mu. The weaknesses of the other heavenly venerables were all in his grasp. Qin Mu walked back and forth, forcefully suppressing the curiosity in his heart and deciding not to think about the ancestral court, Jade Capital. Supreme Emperor smiled, knowing that the more he suppressed it, the more curious he would become. Sooner or later, Qin Mu wouldn't be able to hold it in anymore, and would definitely run to the ancestral court to die. In history, those who had great achievements all had the same characteristic, which was that they had a vigorous curiosity and were full of curiosity towards the unknown. On the contrary, they would ignore whether they would encounter danger in the face of the unknown. Those who survived would succeed and become famous, but the number of people who died because of it was also countless. Supreme Emperor chuckled. Heavenly Venerate Mu. I've told you the geographical map of the sacred city of Yujing. You can go to my territory now and pass the test of God execution stage. Qin Mu shook his head and said, My realm hasn't reached yet, so I'm still unable to ascend God execution stage. Supreme Emperor was stunned. What realm are you on now? Qin Mu felt a little guilty and said, Spirit Embryo. Pui. Supreme Emperor's head in the center of the Great Seal spat out his divine sense and said angrily, Your Spirit Embryo realm? Why didn't you say you were a martial artist realm? Speak human language. Qin Mu hesitated for a moment. Heavenly Palace realm and Spirit Embryo realm, he said honestly. Heavenly Palace is a small realm in my Spirit Embryo realm. There are also 7 small realms in Heavenly Palace. Reverent God, True God, Jade Platform, God Execution Platform, Jade Capital, Ling Shao, and Emperor's Throne. At present, I'm already at the peak of True God realm, and I'm about to step into Jade Platform realm. Supreme Emperor was silent for a moment as if he was digesting the information contained in his words. After a long while he shook his head and probed. In terms of Dao realm, how many heavens are you on? 24 heavens of Dao realm. Qin Mu said. However, my Dao realm seems to be different from the others. My Dao realm seems to be a little stronger. The corners of Supreme Emperor's eyes twitched. Dao realm was 24 heavens, so his abilities should be equivalent to Yujing realm and Heavenly Palace realm. However, when Qin Mu fought with him this time, even though he didn't have primordial spirit, his realm had reached Emperor's Throne realm. With his battle prowess, even if he didn't have primordial spirit, his true battle prowess wouldn't be much inferior to an existence on Emperor's Throne realm. Yet he had been beaten by Qin Mu until he threw away his armor. Even his most powerful divine art had been broken by Qin Mu. It had to be known that no one had been able to break his divine consciousness great overarching heaven divine art since the immemorial era. This divine art contained the divine art of Dao fruit Dao flower, and Qin Mu was the first person to break his divine art. Even Heavenly Venerate Vast Heaven hadn't been able to break his divine art. Your realm is a little strange. Supreme Emperor thought about it carefully, but he still couldn't figure out how powerful Qin Mu was. He could only attribute Qin Mu's strength to him cultivating the Heavenly Palace and Heavenly Court at the same time as well as Dao realm. Since you and I have already discussed it, Heavenly Venerate Mu, you can release the seal now and let me out. Supreme Emperor smiled. Don't worry, as the Emperor of the immemorial era, I won't go so far as to break my promise over such a small matter. Qin Mu hesitated for a moment. Supreme Emperor was suspicious, he sneered. Could it be that you are going to break your promise? Heavenly Venerate Mu, don't forget that I have another identity, and that is the Heaven Consort. Furthermore, I can also mobilize the divine consciousness of the ultimate void, great overarching heaven brand, to kill you. Don't force me to fight to the death. Qin Mu immediately smiled. Dao brother, you are worrying too much. Have you forgotten, Dao brother? We are still brothers. Back then we had agreed to die on the same day, same month, same year. How could I go back on my words? Supreme Emperor's face was as black as iron, and when he mentioned this matter, he was filled with anger. He sneered. Back then, I became sworn brothers with your identity as Great Hong, so it doesn't count. Oh right, big brother, do you know? Third brother Luo Xiao is already dead. And I've been thinking about sending big brother and second brother to accompany him. Qin Mu was so excited that his face turned red, and he choked with sobs. Killing two brothers to accompany third brother has always been my long-cherished wish. Third brother has already been gone for 800,000 years. Cut the crap. Supreme Emperor was furious and shouted. Are you going to let me go or not? Qin Mu said solemnly. Brother, calm down. You said that you wouldn't break your promise, and I also said that I wouldn't break my promise. Heavenly Emperor Absolute Beginning also said that he wouldn't break his promise, but the three of us were people who had broken our promises. The four of us had sworn that we would die on the same day, the same month and the same year. Third brother had been gone for 800,000 years, yet the three of us were still fine. Not a single one of us had accompanied him to death. Therefore I don't trust big brother. Just as Supreme Emperor was about to flare up, Qin Mu immediately said, What I mean is to wait until I go to God execution platform before releasing big brother. You and my blood brothers will settle the score. Don't call me big brother. Supreme Emperor said fiercely. Qin Mu changed his words and smiled. Big brother. Pa. Qin Mu's divine consciousness was sprayed all over his face, so he didn't mind it. His divine consciousness spat on his face. Dao brother, please calm down. You and I aren't people who keep their promises, so how do I know you won't go back on your word? If I let you go and you suddenly go back on your word, wouldn't I be drawing water from a bamboo basket for nothing? Supreme Emperor's expression was gloomy, and after a moment he sneered. I can wait for you to go to God execution platform, but during this period of time, you can't use me as a treasure to attack others. You can't lose Supreme Emperor's face. Qin Mu nodded his head repeatedly and smiled. I understand what brother is thinking. The other thing is, don't call me brother, and don't call me big brother either.
Qin Mu smiled.
We have sworn brothers after all, so we don't want to be born in the same year, same month, same day. Don't mention this again. Qin Mu thought for a moment and sent all kinds of treasures from the vertical I Qin continent to his spirit embryo divine treasure. Only then did he put the treasure seal into the heart of his brows. After all, there were still many treasures in his Qin continent. Some of these treasures couldn't be seen in the light, such as the divine bow of the strong practitioners of the previous era and the corporeal body of Madame Yuan Mu. Spirit embryo divine treasure was also in the heart of his brows, but it didn't intersect with Qin continent. On a daily basis, the egg of Supreme Beginning was placed in the Supreme Beginning mineral vein of Spirit Embryo Divine Treasure. In the treasure seal, Supreme Emperor's head looked around and suddenly caught a glimpse of Qin Mu's vertical eyes pupil, the Taiji Raw stone that was embedded in the center of Qin continent. He immediately used his divine consciousness to barely fly up with the treasure seal. He flew toward the Taiji Raw stone while panting heavily. When he had just arrived in front of him and was about to examine the raw stone carefully, Qin Mu instantly felt something was wrong and immediately grabbed him out of the Qin continent. Taoist brother Supreme Emperor, I have a little secret here that I don't want Taoist brother to know about, so I'll trouble you for a while. I'll carry you on my back. With that, he took out a golden rope and tied the seal on his back. Supreme Emperor's head was facing out and down, so he could only see his heel. He sneered. Heavenly Venerate Mu. Even if you attacked in time, I still saw the key. That stone is the same divine stone as the primordial stone of primordial age. The same grade, they are all raw stones excavated from ancient mineral veins. Qin Mu walked in the direction of the great black wood. He said with a smile that wasn't a smile, Supreme Emperor's knowledge is indeed astonishing. However, this raw stone of mine is different from yours. This raw stone of mine was given to me by the master of the mine on his own accord, but you snatched it away from him. You have formed a deep hatred with the master of the mine, yet I am his bosom friend. Supreme Emperor laughed loudly. How important is the raw stone to the ancient gods in the mine? Why would they give it to you? It must have been you blackmailing him, forcing him to give it to you. Heavenly Venerate Mu, you must have misunderstood the word friendship, right? That ancient god definitely doesn't have any friendship with you. Instead, he's scheming against you. Qin Mu hesitated for a moment and shook his head. He said sincerely, I still believe that human nature is inherently good. Supreme Emperor laughed in extreme anger. To say such words from your kind and black-hearted mouth, it's really a mockery of human nature. Let's not talk about this matter. I can sense the aura of absolute beginning in your eyes, so the one who stole the eggshell of absolute beginning should be you, right? Don't slander me. Qin Mu's face flushed red as he stammered. Slander me, a gentleman is poor, but a lowly person is too poor. How could I do such a thing? It's a disgrace to the cultured. Slander. Supreme Emperor sneered. At that moment a root silently drilled out from the ground behind them, and Supreme Emperor's heart stirred slightly. Earth Mother Primordial Lord? The root of Earth Mother Primordial Lord grew longer and longer, gently touching the seal on Qin Mu's back in an attempt to unseal it. Supreme Emperor's eyes flickered. We are both people who have fallen to the ends of the earth, so perhaps Earth Mother Primordial Lord will be the one to unseal me. Mother Earth is severely injured, and she is besieged on all sides. She has no friends. She wants to join hands with me. Although I have a grudge against her in the past, it's not impossible for us to join hands. Qin Mu didn't seem to feel anything, but his footsteps were extremely fast. He soon covered 1,000 miles, and when Earth Mother Primordial Lord's roots reached a distance of 100 miles, new roots immediately drilled out from behind them. The original roots then quickly retracted. Even after traveling hundreds of thousands of miles, Earth Mother Primordial Lord still couldn't break the seal of the 4 mines on the treasure seal. Supreme Emperor's gaze flickered. Earth Mother still can't break the seal of Qin Mu. Suddenly, dozens of roots gently coiled around the treasure seal and forcefully tore it off Qin Mu's back. The treasure seal fell to the ground and vanished. It was pulled into the ground and vanished. Qin Mu stretched his back and continued forward without turning his head back. After a moment, the treasure seal emerged from the ground tens of thousands of miles away. Together with the treasure seal, countless thick roots appeared. The mountains around them quickly returned to green, and countless trees grew crazily. Flowers and grass were everywhere. The flowers bloomed. The roots danced in the air and turned into an altar. Earth Mother Primordial Lord slowly rose from the altar and cupped her fists at the treasure seal in the center of the altar. Your Majesty Grand Emperor, Primordial Lord greets you. The Supreme Emperor nodded lightly and said indifferently, Yuan Lord, there's no need to be so courteous. Get up. The Earth Mother Yuan Lord straightened his back and smiled. That kid's seal is extremely strange. I was unable to break the seal without alerting him, so I could only snatch His Majesty. I hope Your Majesty can forgive me. In the immemorial era, the Supreme Emperor ruled the universe. Although he was extremely cruel, all the ancient gods were his subjects. Hence, the Earth Mother Yuan Lord followed the ancient system and still addressed him as His Majesty. Of course, in the Battle of Blood Rust in the immemorial era, the Earth Mother also followed the Heavenly Emperor, Absolute Beginning, and played a great role in the battle to eliminate the Creator and the Supreme Emperor. The Supreme Emperor said in a deep voice, Yuan Lord, why didn't you directly kill Celestial Master Mu? Instead, you stole the treasure seal secretly? With your strength, if you killed him directly, he would definitely not be your match. Earth Mother Yuan Jun sized up the seal and suddenly shivered. Her eyes revealed fear. There is someone behind Celestial Master Mu. On the chaotic sea, the existence behind him forced back the 4 celestial masters with one strike. That existence was far more terrifying than the 10 celestial masters. I was worried that that existence did not go far, so I did not dare to attack him. Force back the 4 celestial masters with one strike? The Supreme Emperor's expression was solemn. He muttered. The 4th Heavenly Venerate was severely injured by me. Their strength is not as good as their peak state. If I can force them to retreat, I can do it at my peak, and the Heavenly Emperor can do it at his peak too. When did such an existence exist in the ancestral court? Could it be the Hong Heavenly Venerate? He had always been very wary of the Hong Heavenly Venerate. Heavenly Venerate Hong's identity was Great Hong. Back then, Supreme Emperor had borrowed Great Hong's life and used his name to walk the world. Because Yun Ling and Yu had plotted against his true body in Great Void, He had prepared to destroy Heaven's court in his fury. However, he met Qin Mu's obstruction in Heaven's court. The two of them fought on the heavenly river, and Qin Mu was heavily injured. Great Hong was also heavily injured by Qin Mu, so the two of them retreated separately. On the way, Great Hong encountered a terrifying power that completely wiped out Supreme Emperor's divine consciousness in Great Hong's body. Later on, Supreme Emperor turned into Ming Fangyu, but he didn't expose De Hong's identity. Because he kept this terrifying opponent alive, he could make the other Heavenly Venerates suspect that Heavenly Venerate Hong was Supreme Emperor and not him. In fact, Heavenly Venerate Hong had indeed blocked knives for him many times. Even Heavenly Venerate Gong had beaten Heavenly Venerate Hong countless times. Earth Mother Primordial Lord had only used her roots to break Qin Mu's 4 mineral seals, but now she was using all her strength. Her abilities were formidable, and in such a short time, she had recovered to the level of a strong practitioner comparable to a small heavenly court. However, what puzzled her was that no matter how powerful the divine art she executed, no matter how hard she tried to break the seal of the 4 mines on the treasure seal, she couldn't break it. Not only could she not break it, she couldn't even use any of her attacks on the treasure seal. Even if she used all her strength to attack this precious seal, there was not the slightest bit of power that could land on the precious seal. Any of her divine abilities would pass through the precious seal, and not touch the precious seal at all. After a long time, the Earth Mother Yuan Lord's forehead was covered in cold sweat as she panted heavily. The Supreme Emperor was expressionless as he looked at her coldly. Suddenly he said, "Yuan Lord, enough. I have already understood your intentions. It is possible for you to join me. I have another identity among the 10 heavenly venerates. I can protect you and protect your life." Earth Mother Yuan Jun's face was slightly red. She bowed and said, "Thank you for your mercy, Your Majesty. This seal. Not to mention that you can't break this seal. Even if I do it myself, I won't be able to break it." Emperor Tai said indifferently, "Among the 10 heavenly venerates, not a single one can break his seal. His seal has already surpassed the knowledge of this era. It belongs to the unknown. Even I can only understand half of the knowledge in one of the seals. Heavenly Emperor might be able to understand the other half, but he won't work with me to break the seal." Earth Mother Primordial Lord was startled and cried out, "Heavenly Emperor Mu is actually so powerful? His cultivation is only slightly weaker." Supreme Emperor said indifferently, "If his cultivation is raised to Heavenly Emperor Hao's level, he won't be at a disadvantage even if he competes with me in absolute beginning at his peak." Among the 5 founding members of Heaven Alliance, Yun, Ling, Yu, Qin Mu, Yun died quickly and Yu injured Qin Yin, leaving only Heavenly Venerate Mu. His divine arts are indeed worthy of the title of League Master. No wonder the previous meeting of Heaven Alliance wanted him to be present. Primordial Lord Earth Mother's heart trembled violently. When she recalled Qin Mu's past, she felt that all of this was somewhat inconceivable. Back then, Qin Mu had only been led by Gong Sun Li into Primordial Lord Earth Mother's underground palace. The country bumpkins who were looking around in her underground palace didn't have much experience. But now, even Supreme Emperor had said that Qin Mu couldn't be underestimated, treating him as a true opponent. After all, apart from absolute beginning, Supreme Emperor had never treated anyone else as an opponent. Even Earth Mother Primordial Lord didn't have the qualifications to do so. Earth Mother Primordial Lord hesitated for a moment and probed, "Your Majesty, then now?" Supreme Emperor said expressionlessly, "Now send me back." The Earth Mother Yuan Jun was shocked. Emperor Tai snorted, "Don't send me back to the original place. Just send me to the big black wood and wait for him there." The Earth Mother Yuan Jun showed a look of disbelief and cried out, "Your Majesty, it was not easy for you to. Earth Mother, you have been blinded by the murderous aura and become a little unintelligent. It is very dangerous." The Supreme Emperor sneered, "You should not stay in the ancestral court at all. Instead, you should leave the ancestral court immediately to look for the great Brahma, and use his Buddhist Dharma to refine the baleful aura. Otherwise you will die for sure. The world is in turmoil for the sake of profit, Neither I nor Heavenly Venerate Mu are trustworthy people. However, we have a principle that is very similar to each other. That is, peace is based on profit and separation is based on profit. He wants to borrow my territory so he won't harm me. All right, send me to the side of the great black tree and wait for him. Qin Mu strolled leisurely along the way and admired the magnificent scenery of the ancestral hall. The ancestral hall was much better than when he first came here back then. There were sacred grounds everywhere, and the sounds of birds chirping and the fragrance of flowers filled the air. The sight of huge beasts roaming about was pleasing to the eye. Unknowingly, he had finally arrived in front of the 100,000 Black Mountains and saw a huge seal standing in front of him. Qin Mu walked forward and smiled. Big brother, sorry for the wait. Supreme Emperor snorted coldly. Call me Supreme Emperor. Qin Mu smiled slightly and carried him on his back, walking into the 100,000 Black Mountains. A youth with a big head walked over quickly. He smiled from afar. Heavenly Venerate Mu, why have you been gone for so long? There's something you probably don't know yet. That bastard little brat Supreme Emperor got into a fight with the fourth Heavenly Venerate and was beaten to a miserable state. His body was dismembered and his arms and legs fell from the sky, which was very satisfying. What are you carrying? On the back of the treasure seal, Supreme Emperor's heart skipped a beat. This voice. Oh no. That old scoundrel is still alive. He hurriedly executed his divine consciousness in an attempt to create an illusion to deceive Shu Jun's divine consciousness. However, Qin Mu's Four Minds Great Seal was too strong, so the divine consciousness he could use was limited. Furthermore, he wasn't a great expert in the illusion of divine consciousness, but Gong Fu was. Supreme Emperor cried out bitterly in his heart. Other than being his old enemy, Shu Jun was still his uncle in terms of seniority. Among the three kings of ancient times, God King Boyong was the most steady and reserved. He didn't fight with him for the position of Supreme Emperor. Even though God King Gong 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 wanted to fight for it, he didn't fight for it, so in the end he simply married him. Gong Gong wasn't able to become Supreme Emperor, so she became his woman and ruled the world. On the other hand, Shu Jun wasn't so easy to talk to. From the beginning to the end, he had never yielded to him. He had always fought, and he had always treated Supreme Emperor badly because of his seniority as an uncle. In the immemorial era, he was the one who gave Supreme Emperor the greatest headache. If he saw Supreme Emperor only having his head left, he didn't know what he would say. However, Shu Jun had already come to Qin Mu's side and stretched his head over to size up the treasure seal behind Qin Mu. He smiled and said, "Where did you snatch a treasure from?" "You should have gone to pick up Supreme Emperor's corpse, so I went to pick it up. Unfortunately, I was too late and didn't pick up anything." Juyu clan. His face revealed a look of astonishment and his gaze fell on the head that was sealed by the 4 mountain ranges on the back of the treasure seal. He couldn't move his gaze away and the expression on his face froze. After a moment, it became ferocious as he gritted his teeth. "Supreme Emperor." Supreme Emperor sighed and sneered. "Shu Jun, you're still alive? Where in life do we not meet? You son of a B***T. Shu Jun flew into a rage. He said sternly, "Scum who destroyed my creator race. The heavens have pity on you. You son of a B***tch, you caused the death of my creator race. Everyone is dead, why aren't you dead? You son of a B***tch. Shut up." Monarch Tai flew into a rage. His hair stood on end. The majesty of an ancient monarch was unexcelled. He was so angry that his voice trembled. "You are only a king, and I am an emperor. You better watch your mouth. You son of a B***tch, Monarch Tai." The big-headed youth went forward and wanted to fight him. He said angrily, "Without the creator race, what kind of monarch are you? All our people died because of you." The treasure seal was torn off by him, and Supreme Emperor could only take a beating in it. He couldn't resist and he said furiously, "Heavenly Venerate Mu, stop him for me." Qin Mu didn't stop him, and Supreme Emperor couldn't contain his anger. "Uncle Jun, you have the face to blame me for the destruction of the creator?" he shouted. "How could you have been any better than me back then? When we were expelled from the ancestral court, our influence was already inferior to that of the ancient gods. Wasn't it you who insisted on fighting? At that time, I had already lost my power and was unable to command the creator's various races' armies. Their various races guaranteed that you would be their commander. At that time you were the Supreme Emperor. I was already a stray dog. I no longer had any power. Shu Jun pressed down on his head and beat him until the Supreme Emperor's face was bruised and swollen. The Supreme Emperor was unable to resist, he chuckled and said. Bo Yang was already dead at that time. I was exiled after I shattered the primordial stone. Gong Gong was also assassinated by the Heavenly Emperor Tai Chu. Among the three kings, you were the only one left. You were the last Supreme Emperor of the Creator's race. What did you do? Shu Jun was furious when he heard that. He held his head and hammered it with all his might as he panted heavily. At that time you should have led the other races to escape and find Taisu or build another Taisu. But what about you? You were the commander-in-chief and led the other races to battle with the ancient gods of the primordial realm. The location of your battle was the Blood Rest Zone. The Supreme Emperor did not seem to feel any pain at all, he shouted. The last elites of the Creator race were wiped out by you. They all died because of you. Our race was wiped out because of you. Do you have the face to call me a son of Ab*T? You are the son of Ab*T*. Shu Jun suddenly sat on the ground. His eyes were dull, and he no longer had the strength to beat the Supreme Emperor. The big-headed youth's face was full of dejection. He suddenly covered his face and started to cry. The Supreme Emperor's face was beaten into a mess by him. He said coldly, You have always dreamed of defeating me and dreaming of you becoming the Supreme Emperor. At the most dangerous time of the race you did it. The chiefs and elders of the various races protected you and allowed you to ascend to the throne of the Supreme Emperor. They hoped that you would be able to turn the tide and lead the clansmen to victory. Did you do it? Shu Jun threw himself onto the ground and cried loudly. His body kept twitching. The Supreme Emperor continued to attack him. His voice was cold. You didn't do it. You brought the clan leaders and elders of the various clans, and used the final wealth of the Creator clan to set up countless altars in the starry sky. You gathered the power of everyone to offer sacrifices, and used the divine senses of all the creators to create ancient gods. You rebuilt the Duke of Heaven, rebuilt the Earth Count, and rebuilt the Saints of the Heavens. You took out the sacred objects that the various races had offered sacrifices to for billions of years. Those powerful sacred objects were the protectors of the various races. How powerful were they? You were full of confidence. You thought that you could fight against the ancient gods. Even I didn't expect that battle to be so heroic. The starry sky that stretched for billions of miles was shattered into pieces. Countless continents made from breathing soil were turned into dust. The sacred objects that the Creator race offered sacrifices to were shattered one after another and died. Countless clansmen died in that battle. They used their blood to dye the starry sky into the color of blood rust. They all died. They died in the battle of blood rust that you led. Your Taipu died there too, right? Taipu followed you and grew up. This giant beast is loyal to you. It admires you and worships you like your child. When it died in front of you, did you feel that you were wrong? Tai Di looked coldly at Shu Jun, whose body was twisted from crying too hard on the ground. He continued to strike him mercilessly. People say that I exterminated the Creator race and that I am a sinner. However, if I were the leader of my race, I would never choose the Blood Rust region to carry out the final battle. I am a sinner of the Creator race, but my sin is not as great as yours. You are the sinner who caused the destruction of the Creator's race. I've taken on too many sins for you. Shu Jun's four limbs supported the ground as he tried his best to get up, but he couldn't. Instead, he vomited loudly, but he didn't spit out anything. He only spat out mouthfuls of bile. Sinner, Supreme Emperor said coldly. Shu Jun completely lost his strength and lay on the ground. There wasn't a trace of life in his eyes. Qin Mu looked at this scene quietly and didn't say anything. Only Shu Jun was panting heavily like a dead fish. In the space on the other shore of Great Void, the Creator race actually didn't pay much attention to Shu Jun. Even God King Lang here didn't care about him. Back then, Qin Mu still felt a little puzzled. He was only an outsider, but he could become the sacred infant of the Creator of the other shore. As one of the three kings of ancient times, Shu Jun didn't receive the respect of the Creator of the other shore. Now, he understood the reason behind it. After a moment, Qin Mu helped Shu Jun up. Shu Jun seemed to have aged a lot and pushed his hand away weakly. He didn't look at him, as if he had no face to see him again. He turned around and staggered out of the 100,000 black mountains. Shu Jun was like an injured old wolf. He limped as he walked, gradually walking further and further away. Supreme Emperor was indeed powerful. Even if he was only left with a head and was sealed by Qin Mu, he could still accurately capture everyone's weakness and crush their Dao hearts, disintegrating them. The current Shu Jun had lost all interest in him. If he were to leave like this, he would probably give up completely and choose to die in a remote corner. Shu Yun. Qin Mu called out to him with a calm expression. Are you still a creator? Shu Jun stopped and turned his head back. I'm the sacred infant of the creator race. I need a god king who dares to take responsibility. Qin Mu walked in front of him and took off his robe to drape over his shoulders. He smiled and said, I also need a warrior who dares to fight and kill and even sacrifice his life for the creator race. Stay, the immemorial era is already over, and the creator still has a future. Shu Jun looked at him with a blank gaze and muttered, Heavenly Venerate Mu, you are not a true creator.
Qin Mu smiled brightly.
Anyone who doesn't fear danger, dares to change the world, dares to create new things, opens up mountains when they encounter mountains, bridges when they meet rivers, is a creator. Shu Jun, what's the difference between the current eternal peace and the current human race and creator? Shu Jun's heart was greatly touched and he followed him back. In the treasure seal, Supreme Emperor sneered. Shu Jun, sinner of the creator's race, you have already harmed your own race. Do you still want to harm the human race? He laughed loudly. In the immemorial era, you were a failure when facing me, and you were also a failure when facing the ancient gods. You have lost everything. You will still be a failure in the future. The corner of Shu Jun's mouth twitched, but he didn't say anything. Qin Mu said leisurely, Supreme Emperor, the one who truly sent the immemorial creator onto the path of extinction is actually you. If it was anyone else facing the situation back then, they wouldn't have been able to change the outcome. What I admire about Shu Jun is that he didn't escape like you did, and chose to stay behind to continue fighting. He has the responsibility, but you don't. Supreme Emperor smiled slightly. If you survive, you will be the victor. Heavenly Venerate Mu, you don't know anything. Qin Mu laughed loudly and his vital qi rolled up the treasure seal and gave it to Shu Jun. You guys are uncle and nephew, so you guys can catch up. I still have something to deal with. Uncle Jun hugged the treasure seal and his gaze landed on the head of Supreme Emperor who was trapped. Supreme Emperor's expression changed slightly. He sneered. Uncle Jun, you hit me just now, so we should be even now, right? You have to know that you are also a sinner, so you have no right to criticize me, let alone humiliate me. Heavenly Venerate Mu, you promised me that you wouldn't treat me as a treasure and wouldn't humiliate me. Qin Mu turned back and smiled. When have I ever humiliated you? However, if your uncle wants to humiliate you, it's not convenient for me to stop him. Supreme Emperor was furious and flew into a rage, but he couldn't jump out of the treasure seal. Qin Mu came to the periphery of the 100,000 Black Mountain and saw the gods of eternal peace trying to mine another vein. He couldn't help shaking his head. Where did the fellows of eternal peace learn to be so evil? They don't seem to be afraid of death. He came to the side of the mine and asked. A god immediately said, We are only mining the mine on the periphery. The prehistoric divine weapons inside don't dare to move. Old Master Blind was shrewd and had already drawn out an area for us to mine and avoid the divine weapons in the center of the mine. Old Master Mute said that once we mine the periphery, we will leave the center for Imperial Preceptor to send himself to his death. Qin Mu was very satisfied and smiled. Grandpa Blind and Grandpa Mute still understand me. Of course, I'm not going to send myself to my death, but I have full confidence in subduing those prehistoric divine weapons. He gave some instructions and saw first ancestor human emperor, and the rest leading Zhang Yunjian and the rest of the younger generation to rush back from the outside. These young people had captured a few primordial behemoths to be their mounts, and they were riding on the behemoths in a jubilant and majestic manner. Perhaps eternal peace can get an army of behemoths. Qin Mu calculated for a moment and went to see the dragon Qilin and Yin. He took out the void beast egg. The void beast in Great Void might not be alive, so this egg might be the last void beast. If it hatches, it will be a mother beast. You all must protect it carefully and not go extinct. The dragon Qilin was overjoyed and immediately kept the beast egg. Yenner snatched it over and smiled. The bird nest I built for that big round egg is still there, so it can hatch this void beast egg. Qinmu watched her leave in a hurry and looked at the dragon Qilin. Fatty dragon, where's the thing you want to show me? The dragon Qilin hurriedly presented the treasure and led Qinmu to the center of the 100,000 Black Mountains. There were already palaces built there with all kinds of seals. The dragon Qilin came to the front of a palace and opened the seals and seals. He pushed open the door and smiled. Cultmaster, please take a look. Qinmu walked into the hall and couldn't help being stunned. He saw all kinds of dazzling treasure lights in the hall, and piles of divine gold and divine materials from the various mineral veins piled up like mountains. All kinds of divine gold and divine materials were classified into different categories and were arranged neatly. He walked among the treasures and saw more than a dozen jars. What was in the jars should be primordial chaos, primordial liquid. The aura of primordial liquid was difficult to conceal, and it spread out, making the divine gold and divine materials beside it appear incomparably moist. He then saw the supreme incipient divine stones from the supreme incipient mine. Even though there weren't many of them, there were still more than 200 of them. Following that, his gaze was attracted by the supreme essence divine stones. There were more of them, about 300 of them. The most of them were still the supreme essence divine stones, which were piled up like mountains. The dragon Qilin stood in front of the supreme essence divine stones, proud of himself. His tail stood up like a flagpole covered in scales. Qinmu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Fatty dragon, these Taiji divine stones are all fake. None of them are real. The dragon Qilin was stunned, and he hurriedly turned around to take a look. However, these divine stones were indeed the same as the real Taiji divine stones, so he couldn't see any difference. The mine occupied by Divine Emperor Langxian is a fake Taiji mine, and you've seen the real mine before. Qinmu walked forward and picked up a Taiji divine stone. With a thought, he said, "It's a fake Taiji divine stone." The Taiji divine stone suddenly turned into a wisp of yin and yang qi and dissipated. This is an illusion created by the ancient gods in the Taiji mine. It's fine if it's used to deceive God Emperor Langxian, but it can't fool me. The dragon Qilin was flabbergasted.
Qinmu smiled.
Among the items you snatched, the most valuable ones are still the Supreme Incipient Godstone and Supreme Purity Godstone. However, there's no need to do this in the future. I have some old ties with Celestial Master Gong, and can get 10% of Supreme Purity Godstone from her. I also had an agreement with Heavenly Consort Yen to get 50% of the divine stones from her mine. In the future, they will take the initiative to send them to me. The dragon Qilin lowered his head in dejection, his tail hanging down slowly.
Qinmu smiled.
However, you have also solved a huge problem for me. If I were to snatch Celestial Master Gong's mine personally, I definitely wouldn't be able to pull down my face. You went to snatch it for me. Furthermore, Celestial Master Gong knew that the Void Beast was controlled by Supreme Emperor and framed him, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. The dragon Qilin became proud again, and his lowered tail slowly stood up. Qinmu praised. Especially when you plundered the production of Celestial Emperor Langxian's Supreme Ancient Jade Lake. This makes me feel very gratified. Langxian, this fellow always gives me a bad attitude. He's so eccentric and keeps going against me. You did well. The dragon Qilin's tail stood up straight and danced twice. Qinmu continued. There's only one thing that you didn't do well. Heavenly Venerate Hong is the Heavenly Duke, and the great swamp he occupied is the source of the Heavenly River. You don't have to snatch his mines. You can hide it from other Heavenly Venerates, but you can't hide it from the Heavenly Duke who likes to peek. He definitely knows it was you who did it, but because of my face, he didn't expose you. The dragon Qilin's tail hung down once more. Qinmu was very satisfied. He put away the Supreme Purity Divine Stone and Supreme Incipient Divine Stone and placed them in his divine treasure. This human-rearing scripture is indeed mysterious and unfathomable. Even Fatty Dragon himself couldn't resist it. However, Fatty Dragon has indeed established a great merit. Fatty Dragon, I plan to return to Eternal Peace to look for Heavenly Venerate Moon to treat her injuries. Do you want to return with me? Qinmu asked. The dragon Qilin hesitated for a moment before shaking his head. This place is very good, so I'll stay here. After all, the void beasts still need to hatch. If the mother beast hatches, Yen'er will definitely not be able to hold on by herself. Qin shook his head and thought to himself, Yen'er has most likely seen fatty dragons' human rearing scriptures and is already being fed to death. She won't be able to escape. He found Apothecary. Apothecary muttered to himself, Heal Heavenly Venerate's injuries? I haven't tried it yet. Whether Heavenly Venerate's Tao injuries can be healed by medical path is indeed a huge challenge. Wait for me for 3 to 5 days, I'll find some medicinal herbs. Qin waited for a few days and Apothecary was finally ready. We can set off to heal Heavenly Venerate Moon. Qin was looking forward to it. Grandpa Apothecary, are you confident? I'm not 100% confident. Apothecary said indifferently. Treating Heavenly Venerate's Tao injuries is also a first for me, and it's also a great test for me. I need to personally see Heavenly Venerate use injuries before I can make a decision. I've found many poisonous objects in the ancestral court this time, so I might be able to try them on Heavenly Venerate you. Qin expression changed slightly. Apothecary was full of confidence and laughed loudly. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. I'm not like you who's a half-baked doctor, so I'm very confident every time I use the medicine. Qin thought of his encounter and shivered a few times. If Grandpa Apothecary can't do it, there's still Primordial Beginning. As long as Primordial Beginning can dissolve the Tao injuries on Heavenly Venerate Moon's body, it won't be difficult for me to heal the injuries on her corporeal body. Qin consoled himself. Even though Apothecary's performance always gave people the feeling that it wasn't very reliable, Apothecary was still the strongest sacred hand of the path of medicine in the world. Besides failing to test the new medicine on Qin time and time again, he didn't do any other evil deeds. Qin tidied up his luggage and prepared to set off. He went to look for Shujun, who had left Great Black Mountain with the head of Supreme Emperor in the treasure seal. It was unknown where he had gone. First Ancestor Human Emperor led many human emperors and prepared to go out as well. The many human emperors looked at Qin in unison and revealed hostile gazes. I heard that there's a huge Tai Bodhi beast nearby. Such a huge beast is extremely rare. Back then, it was the mount of the 3 primordial kings, so we planned to subdue that Tai Bodhi. First Ancestor asked Qin or do you want to go with us? The hostility in the eyes of Qi Kong, Yi Shan, and the other human emperors became even stronger. They asked one after another, First Ancestor, why did you call him? With him around, does Tai Bodhi still have a share for us? After we subdue Tai Bodhi, everyone will ride it and beat human Emperor Qin up. Qin laughed loudly and waved at everyone. When he turned around, his expression became incomparably gloomy, giving Apothecary a fright. You want to beat me after subjugating Tai Bodhi? Ancestors of past generations, all of you are still too young. They boarded Eternal Peace's fast ship and sailed out of the 100,000 Black Mountains. Just as they left, Su Shanghua and Lan Yutian led 3,000 gods and huge beasts to the so-called Sacred Mountain. Su Shanghua, Lan Yutian, 3,000 gods and 100 huge beasts stood at the periphery and looked at the 100,000 Black Mountains. They were all speechless for a long time. That old man called Tai Yi is a liar, Su Shanghua muttered.
Lan Yutian not that repeat then.
The dragon Qilin and Yen'er hurriedly came out to welcome them. When they saw them, they could not help but be overjoyed, but also somewhat regretful. Yen'er smiled and said, The cult master just left and you arrived after him. If you had come earlier, you would have met them. Lan Yutian opened his mouth and caught her food in time. He said in surprise, My brother left? The dragon Qilin nodded and whispered, Fortunately, you didn't meet the cult master. Otherwise, he would have tricked you into mining again without paying you. Lan Yutian whispered, Is there food? Food? You're thinking too much. The dragon Qilin curled his lips and said, Take care of the food. My food was made by Yen'er. Everyone surged into the Great Black Mountain. Lan Yutian hesitated for a moment and said, I was planning to ask my brother for a few mountain peaks. Now that he's gone. The dragon Qilin's eyes instantly brightened. He smiled and said, There are many mountain peaks here. We can't even occupy all of them. Whichever mountain peaks you like, you can go there yourself. However, you have to build your own palaces and houses. I have an absolute beginning divine stone here. I can lend it to you to visualize your houses and palaces. Su Shenghua smiled and said, There's no need. It's better if we build them ourselves. Since we're staying at the cult master's place, it's only right to help him dig the mines and contribute. The dragon Qilin hesitated for a moment. He did not tell them that these great black mountains would sometimes crack at night, and that terrifying experts from the prehistoric era would crawl out from within. They'll understand after one night. The dragon Qilin thought. On the second day, Tai will appear and explain to them, and then let them repair the great black mountain. Even so, the dragon Qilin still said earnestly, You must be careful at night. This 100,000 black. The 100,000 sacred mountain is good in everything, but at night you cannot walk out of the black mountain. There is great terror in the darkness. Su Shenghua said in surprise, Don't go out at night? This place looks like the great ruins of the past. The dragon Qilin thought, It's more than 100,000 times more terrifying than the great ruins. Heavens have mercy on us. Cult Master has finally tricked two smart people to protect this territory. Previously, I was the only smart person here to take charge of the overall situation. To fight against an existence like 10th Heavenly Venerate, I'm still a little weak. His tail raised up with a whoosh and trembled. He was proud of himself in his heart. I've actually fought against someone as vicious and evil as 10th Heavenly Venerate for so many years, yet they still couldn't snatch away 100,000 sacred mountains. I'm really amazing. Even though Eternal Peace's fast ship wasn't slow, it wasn't as fast as Heavenly Venerate Moon's lantern. Qin Mu and Apothecary spent more than a month to fly from 100,000 sacred mountains to the crack in the sky. During this period of time, Apothecary had been thinking about all kinds of spirit pills and medicines on the ship. At times he would hold his chin and think hard. At other times he would write rapidly, and at other times he would list out the detailed composition of all kinds of spirit medicines. Sometimes he would use his vital qi to transform into the Tao patterns contained in all kinds of spirit medicines, breaking them one by one to assemble new Tao patterns. Even though he appeared to be full of confidence and treating Heavenly Venerate you was a piece of cake, the pressure in his heart was also very great. After all, this was the first time he had come into contact with Heavenly Venerate, and what he needed to heal was Heavenly Venerate's Tao injuries. This was the first time since he had mastered the path of medicine, and it was also the most troublesome time in his life. Qin Mu was tidying up the Supreme Incipient God stones on the ship, and burying them in the Supreme Incipient mine of his spirit embryo divine treasure. The egg of Supreme Incipient God jumped out from its nest on the sacrificial altar and bounced around, instructing him to bury every single God stone in the correct direction. Qin Mu was like a hard-working little squirrel, and under his command, he finished dealing with the God stones. He then took out the Supreme Incipient Godstone and planned to bury it in the Supreme Incipient Godstone as well. When he was almost done burying it, he suddenly came to a realization. Goddess Supreme Purity has already been born and has a grudge against me. Why would I bury these divine stones? It's impossible for her to return to her egg and hatch in my spirit embryo. He dug out a divine stone and took out the shell of the Supreme Purity egg. He then raised his head and drank a mouthful of egg liquid from the edge of the shell, and immediately began to use the Supreme Purity Divine Stone to refine the Supreme Essence liquid. Suddenly, Apothecary, who was deep in thought, opened his eyes and sniffed. Smells so good. What medicinal herb is this? Qin Mu refined Supreme Element liquid and said, This is the egg liquid of Supreme Element egg, not a medicinal herb. Anything in the world can be used as medicine, let alone an ancient god in the egg. Apothecary's gaze flickered. Bring me a bit of egg liquid and I'll see if it can be used as medicine. Qin Mu took out some egg liquid and felt his heart ache. This is the egg liquid of the egg of Supreme Element and it's unparalleled in the world. If you use a little, you'll use a little less. Grandpa Apothecary must be careful. If it can't be used as medicine, return it to me and I'll eat it. You're just wasting heavenly treasures by eating nonsense. If it falls into my hands, it'll be the best medicine to cure illnesses and save people. Apothecary sneered as he carefully observed the Tai elemental liquid. He muttered some words as he used his Yuan Qi to transform into various strange Tao patterns of spirit herbs. Previously he had tried to piece together different Tao patterns, but all of them ended in failure. This time he carefully took out a thread of the Thai elemental liquid. With the thought, the Thai elemental liquid actually changed according to his will, and slowly transformed into strange Tao patterns, connecting the Tao patterns of spirit, herbs one after another. Apothecary suddenly burst into tears but laughed loudly. He raised his head and allowed the tears to flow down his cheeks. My Tao has succeeded. Qin Mu was holding the eggshell and drinking vital liquid, as though he was holding an unreasonably large bowl of rice and porridge. When he saw this scene, he was very happy and hurriedly put down the eggshell and asked, Grandpa Apothecary, how confident are you in healing Heavenly Venerate Moon? Apothecary stood up in high spirits and gave off the aura of a grandmaster. He raised a finger and said, 10%. Qin Mu lowered his head and took out a few more Tai Su divine stones to quickly refine them to comprehend the path of Tai Su. Apothecary didn't take it to heart. Instead, he was in high spirits as he opened the furnace on the ship to refine spirit pills. Every time he refined a furnace of spirit pills, Apothecary would open his mouth and swallow them. Qin Mu and Apothecary didn't interfere with each other. They cultivated one another's way, and after 2 days, the heavenly palace of Path of Medicine suddenly appeared behind Apothecary. His primordial spirit actually crossed the Jade Lake and went straight for God Execution platform. Qin Mu took a glance at it and didn't pay it any attention. Apothecary didn't make a sound and continued to refine pills and eat pills. After another 3 to 5 days, Heavenly Palace of Path of Healing appeared behind Apothecary once more. His primordial spirit had actually come to God Execution platform and ascended it. Qin Mu was finally startled by him and stared at the scene with wide eyes. Apothecary kept his heavenly palace and continued to focus on refining spirit pills. After another 6 to 7 days, Qin Mu was astonished to find that Apothecary's primordial spirit's cultivation had increased explosively. It had actually come to God Execution platform of Heavenly Palace. Under his astonished gaze, Apothecary's primordial spirit had actually stood on God Execution stage and survived the tempering of 2 murderous auras. This was something that was practically impossible, yet it had happened right in front of his eyes. Apothecary had cultivated to God Execution stage realm in a short period of time, and had even overcome the difficulty of God Execution. It had to be known that the highest cultivation realm in disabled elderly village was village chief and butcher, but village chief and butcher might not have cultivated to God Execution stage realm either. And as the existence at the bottom of disabled elderly village's cultivation realm, Apothecary had always been known for his weak cultivation. He was the person with the most vicious means in disabled elderly village and was also the person who was the easiest to get rid of. And now, his cultivation realm had probably jumped to become the number 1 in disabled elderly village. After Apothecary cultivated to God Execution stage realm, he didn't continue to refine spirit pills. Instead, he calmed his heart and pondered for a moment before asking, Muir, how many Emperor's Throne techniques do you know? Qin Mu couldn't be bothered to refine the supreme element liquid, and immediately displayed his 18 heavenly palaces to explain to him one by one. Apothecary sat in the cabin and listened carefully. Qin Mu was a great expert in cultivation, and had extraordinary comprehension towards the various Emperor's Throne techniques that he cultivated. If he were to personally execute a demonstration, it could be said to be equivalent to a heavenly venerate personally explaining his comprehension to Apothecary. It was naturally an extraordinary splendor, a rare grand occasion. Apothecary kept asking questions to voice out the doubts in his heart, and Qin Mu answered them one by one. After a long time, Apothecary understood Sword Heavenly Palace. He asked Qin Mu to describe the Tao markings and the structure of Sword Heavenly Palace in detail for him to listen to while Qin Mu explained it in detail. Apothecary pondered it for a long time before burying his head into refining spirit pills. When the spirit pills were about to be completed, he took out a wisp of supreme element liquid and threw it into the pill furnace. When the pill furnace opened, a spirit pill flew out. Apothecary's palm rotated gently, and the spirit pill fell into his palm. Apothecary's fingertips touched the spirit pill, and a sword cry suddenly sounded out. Sword lights burst forth from the spirit pill, and they turned into a sword heavenly palace around him, enveloping the entire ship. The medicinal efficacy was then withdrawn, and the sword heavenly palace sank into the spirit pill once more. When Qinmu saw this scene, he had a strange feeling in his heart. He asked with the courtesy of a disciple, "Grandpa Apothecary, why does the path of medicine have such a performance? What is the path of medicine?" Apothecary kept the spirit pill. "I've also comprehended the path of medicine heavenly palace after coming to the ancestral hall," he said with joy. "Not long ago, I also obtained your supreme element liquid, so I finally understood the path of medicine." Mute said that the way of man is to give more than what is needed, and the way of heaven is to give more than what is needed to make up for what is not needed. This sentence has his reason, but the way of medicine is different. His eyes became brighter and brighter. He said, "The way of medicine is also the way of man, giving more than is needed to make up for what is not needed. People have the pain of birth, old age, illness, death, and injury. People cannot be born, and the way of medicine helps life. People grow old, and the way of medicine slows down the aging process. When people are sick, the way of medicine cures illness. When people are dying, the way of medicine saves life. When people are injured, the way of healing. When people are in pain, the way of healing is painful. Birth, old age, sickness, and death are natural, and humans have to go against nature. They have to find the path of going against nature from all sorts of natural principles. Muir, this is the path of medicine." He displayed his heaven palace of the path of medicine. He smiled and said, "My cultivation is insufficient, so I use the path of medicine to treat it. I use spirit pills and miraculous medicines to raise my cultivation realm. I'm not proficient in sword arts, I don't know sword skills, and I don't know sword path. Thus, I use the path of medicine to refine the pills of the heaven palace of the sword. This way, I can temporarily own a heaven palace of the sword by consuming spirit pills, and my strength will increase greatly. As the saying goes, if you master one technique, you will be able to master 100 techniques. If you master one technique, you will be able to master 100 techniques. The same goes for medicine path. Muir, even though your cultivation and abilities are much stronger than mine, and even though you are much smarter than me, I still have two things that are better than you." He raised two fingers. "The first is your appearance. The second is medicine path. Your medicine path is just the beginning. You still need to continue cultivating." Qinmu bowed and said, "I naturally agree with the second point," Grandpa Apothecary said, "but I don't quite agree with the first point." The two of them laughed loudly. "In that case, how confident is Grandpa Apothecary in curing heavenly venerate moon?" Qinmu asked again. 30%. Apothecary raised another finger. "I can't understand Heavenly Venerate's great Tao and don't have Heavenly Venerate's Tao skills. If you can see Heavenly Venerate Moon's Tao injuries, then I have 100% confidence. Healing Heavenly Venerate Moon. Even though I'm the one to heal him, the key still depends on your eyesight." Qinmu raised his eyebrows. The fast ship came to the outside of the ancestral court and sailed into Spirit Energy Mutual Shift Bridge. Not long later, the fast ship came to Eternal Peace. It sailed over the sky of the origin world and headed towards the peach forest beside Dao Sect. The fast ship would take a few days to reach there. Qinmu continued to teach Apothecary the techniques of the other emperor's thrones with all his heart. Even though Apothecary couldn't learn them, he memorized the runes of the emperor's thrones and the Dao patterns formed by the runes. He used all kinds of spirit herbs he had collected from the ancestral court to construct the Tao patterns in the spirit pills and refined the heavenly palace with the Tao patterns. He refined a few more spirit pills, and the fast ship came to the side of Dao Sect. Qinmu stopped the fast ship, and the two of them jumped off. Qinmu waved his hand and put the fast ship away on the Qin continent. Apothecary slowly let out a turbid breath and bowed to the peach forest. Eternal Peace's idol Apothecary has come with Heavenly Venerate Mu to pay his respects to the master of the peach forest. His current cultivation was much stronger than before and his voice was transmitted to the deepest part of the peach forest. After a long while, a young lady in purple took small steps out of the peach forest and greeted them gently. She said softly, "Esteemed guests, please follow me." Qinmu and Apothecary followed the young lady into the peach forest. They had only taken a few steps when the peach forest experienced the changes of the 4 seasons. Some of the peach flowers were blooming, some of the peaches were green, some of the peach fragrance assailed their nostrils, and some of the peach leaves were withered red. There was also the snow hanging from the peach forest, which made people click their tongues in wonder. However, Qinmu knew that this peach forest wasn't really a peach forest. Instead, it was a unique land formed by countless peach forests of the heavens. They didn't seem to have walked far after taking one step, but in fact it was possible that they had walked from one world to another. The peach forest represented the highest achievement in the path of space. This peach forest was the handiwork of Heavenly Venerate You. They came to the palace in the depths of the peach forest and followed the girl in. In the palace, the girl retreated, leaving only Qinmu and Apothecary behind. Qinmu looked at the figure behind the screen and said solemnly, Heavenly Venerate You, the strongest apothecary in the world, the medicine king who founded the heavenly palace of Medicine Path, I've brought him here. Are you ready? The body of the woman behind the screen trembled. After a moment she said in a low voice, I'm ready, come in. Qinmu and Apothecary took a step forward together and walked behind the screen. Apothecary said solemnly, Moore, do you still remember? I'm 30%, you're 70%. With your eyesight, you mustn't make a mistake. The vertical eye in the heart of Qinmu's brows opened, and his blood boiled. After the two of them walked into the screen, there was a woman sitting there with disheveled hair. Qinmu finally saw Heavenly Venerate You. There was a sword wound on her waist and it was a shocking sight. It was a sword wound left behind by Heavenly Venerate Xiao. Heavenly Venerate Xiao Weisu used a sword, and his sword was Emperor Sword. At the same time as the reincarnation of Heavenly Emperor Absolute Beginning, he was proficient in all kinds of divine arts, paths, and skills. Heavenly Venerate Yu's long hair covered her face, making it impossible to see her face clearly. There were flames fluttering under her long hair, constantly burning her face. That was the Tao wound left behind by Heavenly Venerate Fire's fist seal. Heavenly Venerate Fire's divine powers were world-shaking. He could kill her in the Southern Emperor Vermilion Bird's ancestral land. There was also a large hole on Heavenly Venerate Yu's head. Her skull had cracked open, revealing her brain matter. That was the wound that the Ancestor God King had caused her. The Ancestor God King had refined the treasure of 49 Heavenly Tao, so he could assemble it wantonly and turn it into the most powerful treasure of Heavenly Tao. Qinmu went around Heavenly Venerate Moon's back, and there was a huge palm print on her back. It was Heavenly Venerate Vast Heaven's palm print. Heavenly Venerate Vast Heaven had cultivated innately one Qi and Great Tao of Sinkhole. Even though this print had never fused innately one Qi and Great Tao of Sinkhole, there were two divine arts hidden in it. The Great Tao of Sinkhole turned into a great abyss and devoured Heavenly Venerate Moon's cultivation. It strengthened the destructive power of innately one Qi. Qinmu took a step forward and came in front of her again. He gently parted the long hair on her forehead that covered her face. At that moment, Heavenly Venerate Moon raised her hand to grab his wrist and said in a hoarse voice, No, I'm ugly. Qinmu gently pushed away her palm with his other hand and said gently, In my heart, you have never been ugly. Let me take a look. Heavenly Venerate You didn't stop him anymore. He gently parted the long hair on Heavenly Venerate Yu's forehead and his gaze landed on her face. Her face had already been destroyed, and her skin couldn't be seen. The strongest fire divine art in the world rampaged on her face, forming terrifying flame patterns. Qinmu's gaze landed on the heart of her brows. There was a deep hole in the burn mark. The hole was caused by the impact of his divine consciousness. Divine Emperor Lang Xian's divine consciousness was incomparably powerful. Other than Heavenly Consort Qi and Heavenly Venerate Gong who didn't dare to reveal their identities, he was the number one person in the Heavenly Court. His divine consciousness pierced through the center of Heavenly Venerate Yu's brows and attacked her brain and primordial spirit. Heavenly Venerate Yu's Tao of Space and divine arts of space had reached their limits. Even though her battle prowess wasn't the highest among Heavenly Venerates, she was in an invincible position. No one could hurt her. The only chance to hurt her was when Heavenly Venerate Yu had to protect Heavenly Venerate Ling. Even though Qinmu hadn't seen the battle, he could imagine the situation. The instant Heavenly Venerate Yu tried to execute her divine art to send Heavenly Venerate Ling away was the instant her flaw was exposed. At that moment, Divine Emperor Lang Xian's divine consciousness went first and pierced into the heart of her brows, disturbing her mind and consciousness. It attacked her primordial spirit. This attack made her more vulnerable. Thus, Celestial Master Zhao's sword took the opportunity to attack. The The sword was the fastest and only needed a simple stab. Because Celestial Master Yu's space Ubijna was very powerful. As soon as she came back to her senses, she could immediately escape. She had to use the fastest attack to make her lose control of her body. Therefore, Celestial Master Zhao's sword pierced into her waist, making her legs lose consciousness. At that moment, Fire Celestial Master's fist came to Celestial Master Yu's face, while Heavenly Master Hao's palm print came to her back. The two of them worked together perfectly. One at the front and one at the back, they delivered a fatal blow to Celestial Master Yu. However, Celestial Master Yu was the most difficult to kill. Her Tao of Space could shift the enemy's attack to other dimensions, rendering the enemy's most powerful attack ineffective. The final strike was the Ancestor God King's Heavenly Tao Supreme Treasure. It was the strongest strike and also a fatal strike. In the end, Heavenly Venerate Yu still managed to escape, but her Tao injuries could no longer be healed. It was already a great miracle that she could survive. Heavenly Venerate Yu raised her hand and closed the long hair in front of her forehead to cover her face. She said in a low voice, "Heavenly Venerate Mu, this is already very good, very good. It's the best ending." No. Qin Mu took out a scroll and gently unfolded it before hanging it on the screen. The Heavenly Venerate Moon in the painting had the playfulness and shyness of a young girl. The Yu in this painting is the best ending. The vertical eye in the heart of Qin Mu's brows became brighter and brighter as he looked at the Tao injuries on her body. Apothecary went forward and examined her for a moment before saying in a deep voice, "Starting from the last strike, I need to know all the Tao markings contained in the Tao injuries on the top of her head. This is the Tao injury created by Heavenly Tao." Qin Mu immediately executed his vital qi and used it to transform the Ancestral God King's Heavenly Tao Supreme Treasure. He used the runes of Heavenly Tao to form Tao markings and then used the Tao markings to construct the Heavenly Tao Supreme Treasure to recreate the exquisiteness of the Ancestral God King's strike, as well as the Tao injuries that remained on Heavenly Venerate Moon's body. Apothecary listened carefully and observed the Tao markings that Qin Mu had transformed. He said in a deep voice, "I don't understand much about Heavenly Tao, so explain the Tao marvels contained in these Tao markings." Qin Mu explained in detail, and Apothecary listened while dispensing the medicine. Heavenly Venerate Yu sat there quietly. She saw a middle-aged man and a youth cooperating very closely, and a glimmer of hope couldn't help appearing in her heart. After Apothecary finished dispensing the spirit medicine, Qin Mu took out the egg of Supreme Element, and Apothecary took out a trace of Supreme Element liquid from the eggshell. "You, will anyone find you here?" Qin Mu asked. Heavenly Venerate Yu was slightly stunned, and he immediately understood what he meant. "There are some people who don't want me to recover completely. If Mr. Apothecary can really heal my injuries, then there will indeed be people who will stop me. However, don't worry. There aren't many people in this world who can hurt me, even if I'm already crippled." Apothecary wasn't in a hurry to concoct medicine. Instead, he placed the ingredients he had concocted to the side. "When I heal the Tao injuries on your body, it's very likely that the person who left behind the Tao injuries will be alarmed. Why don't we investigate all the Tao injuries and treat them together?" Heavenly Venerate Moon's heart moved slightly and he smiled. "If the 5 Heavenly Venerates, Hao, Hua, Shao, Lang and Ancestor, attack me together, I won't be able to withstand them." Apothecary frowned and looked at Qin Mu. Qin Mu pondered for a moment and said, "I'll explore all the injuries first. I'll first have a decision in my heart and then see how to treat them." Apothecary nodded and said, "Muer, the injuries on Heavenly Venerate Yu's back, heart and face were inflicted at the same time and need to be treated at the same time. Can you see through them?" Qin Mu executed the vertical eye in the heart of his brows to the extreme and his gaze landed on the Tao injury left behind by Heavenly Venerate Vast Heaven. "The great Tao of Sinkhole and Innate One Qi. I'm not inferior to Heavenly Venerate Vast Heaven. Then what about Heavenly Venerate Fire's Sacred Fire?" Apothecary asked as he sized up Heavenly Venerate Moon's face. Qin Mu's heart sank, and the corners of his eyes twitched. Apothecary noticed the expression on his face and frowned slightly. He knew that Qin Mu wasn't omnipotent. Only Village Chief and him knew that Overlord Body was just a white lie. Qin Mu said solemnly, "I have done research on Heavenly Fire and haven't done any research on Heavenly Venerate Fire's Sacred Fire. but I'm proficient in Tao sect algebra and entering the path in Buddhist dreams. Furthermore, I have divine eyes that are stronger than Grandpa Blind, so it won't take me long to see through his sacred fire. Apothecary's gaze was filled with some worry, but he quickly concealed it. Qin Mu was able to break through the Tao injuries left behind by the ancestor God King, and heavenly venerate vast heaven because he understood the great Tao of the other party. Regardless of whether it was heavenly Tao, innately one Qi, or great Tao of Sinkhole, he had studied them deeply. However, he didn't understand heavenly venerate fire's great Tao. What he understood was heavenly fire great Tao of Mystic City, and vermilion bird sacred fire great Tao of South Pole Heaven. However, both of them belonged to innate flames, while heavenly venerate fire's fire was acquired flames, representing the highest achievement of acquired flames. It was probably impossible to break the Tao injuries left behind by heavenly venerate fire in a short period of time. Apothecary looked at Qin Mu, who was focused on evolving the Tao patterns in the Tao injuries left behind by heavenly venerate vast heaven. He was very serious. Qin Mu had been so serious and meticulous when he was young. He had learned knowledge from the 9 elders of disabled elderly village and was often hit by death. Qin Mu was already an adult now. Sometimes he looked frivolous and sometimes he was as serious as a student. When he was frivolous, he would often risk his life to fight. When he was as serious as a student, he would often save the people he cared about. Apothecary understood Qin Mu very well. After a long time, Qin Mu transformed the Tao injuries left behind by heavenly venerate vast heaven into Tao markings, and explained them one by one. Apothecary listened quietly. The Tao injuries left behind by heavenly venerate vast heaven gave him a huge challenge. The Tao injuries left behind by heavenly venerate vast heaven were even more complicated than the strike of the ancestor God King's heavenly Tao. The great Tao of primordial Qi and Sinkhole was even harder to crack than the great Tao of heavenly Tao. His heavenly palace had achieved great success in the Tao of medicine, but the Tao of medicine belonged to the acquired Tao, while the heavenly Tao, the innate Qi, and the great Tao of the Sinkhole belonged to the innate Tao. Whether or not he could cure heavenly venerate you might seem like a prescription, but in reality, it was a battle between the Tao of medicine and the Tao of the innate. Although the spirit herbs produced by the ancestor court were very mystical, many of them contained the Tao of the innate. And the Tao of medicine combined these incoherent principles to form a counter to the Tao of the innate, or even disintegrate it. From there, the goal of curing the sick and saving the people could be achieved. To heavenly Tao, innate one Qi, and great Tao of returning ruins, Apothecary's path of medicine belonged to poison, but to heavenly venerate moon, it belonged to medicine. Qin Mu once again parted the long hair on heavenly venerate moon's forehead, and observed heavenly venerate fire's sacred flame in detail. This time he used even more time. Just as Apothecary was worried, Qin Mu didn't understand heavenly venerate fire, so he spent even more time on heavenly venerate fire's Tao injuries. Heavenly venerate fire's paths, skills, and divine arts were extremely profound, and he didn't have a corresponding collection in the Guardian Pavilion. The paths, skills, and divine arts in the Guardian Pavilion were all targeted at the ancient gods. And the great Tao runes of heavenly venerate fire didn't repeat much with the great Tao runes of the ancient gods. Qin Mu kept staring at heavenly venerate moon, and he could face it calmly. He held his breath and didn't speak. After an unknown amount of time, Qin Mu slowly closed his eyes. Layers of dreams emerged from the heart of his brows and expanded outwards, quickly enveloping the entire hall. In the dream, countless tiny Qin Mu yawned and stretched, waking up from their dreams. Heavenly venerate you looked at this scene curiously. She wasn't unfamiliar with it, but the last time she saw Qin Mu execute this kind of technique was more than 40,000 years ago. At that time, Qin Mu had entered her dream to search for a way to survive. This time it was Qin Mu who entered the dream again to search for a way to cure her. Qin Mu of all sizes in the dream had solemn expressions as he mumbled in a language that others couldn't understand. Small flames spouted from his mouth, and heavenly venerate you observed him for a long time. One of the small Qin Mu actually visualized a flame wheel behind his head. The other tiny Qin Mu also imitated it one after another, and each of them created a flame wheel. They were still mumbling with solemn expressions, but no one knew what they were talking about. They are imitating heavenly venerate of fire. Heavenly venerate you didn't know whether to laugh or cry. In Qin Mu's dream, these little fellows were actually imitating the appearance of heavenly venerate of fire. Furthermore, they were imitating him more and more accurately. The tiny Qin Mu was studying the great Tao runes in the Tao injuries left behind by heavenly venerate fire bit by bit. He was experimenting with the functions of each rune, trying to form divine arts, and some were even trying to deduce heavenly venerate fire's techniques. Ma! Suddenly, a tiny Qin Mu let out a miserable cry and turned into a small person on fire, sprinting frantically in the dream. Heavenly venerate Yu jumped in fright and was about to rescue the petite person when he saw the other petite Qin Mu catching fire as well. The small people on fire quickly ignited the layer of dream realm and burned it to ashes. The other dream realms were still fine and hadn't been ignited. Numerous petite Qin Mu disguised as heavenly venerate fire walked around with a solemn expression, discussing the profoundness of heavenly venerate fire's paths, skills, and divine arts. Suddenly, another tiny Qin Mu spewed fire from his eyes, ears, mouth, and nose. The fire started burning in his body and instantly burned him into ashes. The other tiny Qin Mu gloated over his misfortune and pointed at him while laughing loudly. All of a sudden, true fire ignited in their bodies and burned them completely. Layer after layer of dream realms were burned into ashes, and each layer had a different way of dying. Heavenly venerate Moon had been lonely in the peach forest for too long, so he didn't feel bored when he saw the tiny Qin Mu tossing and turning in these dreams. When the dreams were burned, new ones were born, and the cycle repeated itself, deducing the meaning of the fire Tao markings. After a few days, more and more fire runes were sorted out, and the frequency of the tiny Qin Mu's deaths in the dreams became higher and higher. There were traces of innate path that could be traced. The innate path of 10 heavenly venerate had been developed from the great Tao runes of the ancient gods, but heavenly venerate fire's path and innate fire had only taken up half of it. It was extremely difficult to deduce the essence of his great Tao of fire, and his understanding of the Tao of fire was even above that of the vermilion bird of South Emperor. After a few more days, Qin Mu finally finished analyzing the fire runes contained in his Tao injuries, and his expression was a little dazed. Apothecary planned to prepare some medicine for him to recuperate his divine consciousness, but Qin Mu shook his head and refused. However, his expression was still a little dazed. My divine consciousness can still hold on, but after studying fire heavenly venerate's great Tao runes, I saw many truths from them, but there are some things I can't understand, Apothecary said with a smile. You have a great heavenly venerate by your side, so why do you have to think so hard? Just ask her directly. Qin Mu pondered for a moment and told Moon Heavenly Venerate about the confusion he had encountered while comprehending Fire Heavenly Venerate's great Tao runes. Heavenly Venerate Fire's great Tao runes are extremely exquisite, and he uses heart flames to refine vital qi. His cultivation might be extremely vigorous, but I once sensed a flaw in his disciple, so he couldn't refine his soul. However, from the basic runes of his path of fire, he can refine his soul. Heavenly Venerate Moon's heart moved slightly, and he asked, "What do you mean?" Qin Mu stretched out his hand and gently waved it in front of him. Rows of fire runes appeared and burned in the air. His sacred fire first originates from his heart fire, which cultivates vital qi. When cultivated to a certain extent, it can evolve into soul fire. Logically speaking, his soul should be incomparably powerful. Heavenly Venerate Yu frowned and carefully observed the fire runes arranged by him. He then gently waved it and one of the runes was destroyed. After taking this rune, can Heavenly Venerate Fire still refine his soul? Qin Mu carefully observed it and shook his head. I can't. Then, are there any fire runes that I've destroyed in my Tao injuries? Heavenly Venerate Yu asked. Yes. Qin Mu said solemnly. This is the strangest part. Among the paths, skills, and divine arts that Heavenly Venerate Fire imparted to his disciples, this fire rune doesn't exist. The fire path of the fire Heavenly Venerate only needed to remove a basic fire rune, and it could cause a great change in the cultivation method and abhijna, resulting in a flaw in the soul. And from the performance of the human abhijna practitioners and gods in South Heaven, no one knew that the fire Heavenly Venerate's cultivation method contained this fire rune. In other words, other than Heavenly Venerate Fire himself, no one realized that not only did Heavenly Venerate Fire didn't have a weakness in his soul was extremely powerful. A powerful soul also meant that his primordial spirit was extremely powerful. If someone wanted to use their soul to deal with heavenly venerate fire, they would definitely suffer a huge loss. I wonder if heavenly venerate fire passed his technique to heavenly venerate clear? Qin Mu was in a daze. If heavenly venerate fire had passed his technique to heavenly venerate clear, this flaw would have followed heavenly venerate clear, making it impossible for heavenly venerate clear to refine his soul to an extremely powerful level through this technique. He even realized that heavenly venerate fire had this weakness. Of course, heavenly venerate clear had other techniques and divine arts that could refine his soul, but the key was that if heavenly venerate clear thought he had grasped heavenly venerate fire's weakness, he would definitely suffer a huge loss. None of the 10 heavenly venerates are simple figures. He couldn't help but sigh. Among the 10 heavenly venerates, the simplest-looking ones were heavenly venerate Hua and the ancestor god king. Heavenly venerate Hua abhorred evil, and the ancestor god king had a fiery temper. They were both simple-minded people. However, how could a simple person become a 10 heavenly venerate? Simple people are already dead. He calmed his mind and explained the sequence of Tao patterns in the Tao injuries caused by fire heavenly venerate to Apothecary. Apothecary listened very seriously and recorded it down meticulously before selecting the spirit herbs he needed. Qin Mu couldn't help saying, "Grandpa Apothecary, you have never been so careful when you concocted medicine for me in the past. Your skin is thick and your flesh is thick. Furthermore, you have been soaking in all kinds of spirit herbs since you were young, so you are resistant to medicine," Apothecary said to him nonchalantly. Qin Mu was silent for a moment as he recalled his childhood. When he thought of the other people in disabled elderly village, he was filled with happy memories. However, when he recalled Apothecary, he would always experience all kinds of painful experiences after trying the medicine. At that time his skin wasn't thick and his flesh wasn't thick. On the contrary, he was very thin and weak due to malnutrition. Granny Asai carried him around to other villages to get milk to eat. Later on, she kidnapped the wife of Border Dragon City Lord, and turned her into a cow to feed him milk. At that time, Apothecary had already placed him in the medicine barrel to test the medicine. In the name of strengthening his body, it made it easier for the little guy to survive. He shook his head and threw these past events that were unbearable to recall to the back of his head. Then the next one is Heavenly Venerate Zhao's sword, right? Heavenly Venerate Zhao's sword was the second attack. It was fast and broke Heavenly Venerate Yu's lumbar vertebrae, piercing through her. Qin Mu examined it carefully and found that the divine art contained in Heavenly Venerate Zhao's sword wasn't innate one qi, but the technique that came from Heavenly Venerate Yun, Violet Firmament Jade Falling Technique. From Yun Jianli, Qin Mu had seen Heavenly Venerate Yun's Violet Firmament Jade Falling Technique. The greatest characteristic of this technique was that it was all-encompassing and had extremely strong plasticity. Even though Violet Firmament Jade Falling Technique was vastly different from Qin Mu's Overlord Body 3 Elixir Technique, they both had the same characteristic, which was that they were good at absorbing the strengths of other sects and techniques for their own use. The reason why Qin Mu could fuse 18 heavenly palaces so quickly and raise Overlord Body 3 Elixir Technique to the level of the Great Heavens was related to the foundation of Overlord Body 3 Elixir Technique. Violet Firmament Jade Falling Technique also had this strange characteristic. Celestial Venerable Zhao's sword contained a lot of Emperor's Throne techniques, so there was no sense of sluggishness between the different Emperor's Throne techniques. He examined it for a long time and fell into deep thought. His expression was uncertain. Apothecary waited quietly by the side, and Qin Mu stood up. He walked around and suddenly stopped. "Celestial Venerable Yu, I need 2 people to help me. One is Emperor Yun Luo Wei Suifeng, and the other is Celestial Venerable Yun's descendant, Yun Jianli. They are both in eternal peace at the moment." His divine consciousness rippled, and he sent the appearances of Wei Suifeng and Yun Jianli into Celestial Venerable Yu's mind. Heavenly Venerate Yu said, "Wait a moment." Not long after, Heavenly Venerate Yu summoned a palace maid and ordered, "There are 2 distinguished guests in the peach forest outside. They are searching for a path. Go to the palace gate and take a lantern. Invite them here." The palace maid acknowledged and walked out of the palace. She took a lantern and went into the peach forest. 2 men's voices came from the peach forest. She said in surprise, "Strange, strange. What is this place? Why am I here all of a sudden? Which divine being made a move to bring us here? Divine being, please show yourself. The palace maid picked up the lantern and the light shone on their faces. It was already night outside, and Wei Suifeng and Yun Jianli stood in the peach forest with wary expressions. A moment later, Wei Suifeng and Yun Jianli followed the palace maid to the palace. When they saw Qin Mu and Apothecary, they were both astonished but didn't say anything. Qin Mu said, "Brother Yun, big senior brother, this is Heavenly Venerate you. He's injured and needs your help." Yun Jianli hurriedly went forward and kowtowed. "In my ancestors' teachings, if you meet Heavenly Venerate you, you must kowtow to him and thank him for his help. Get up." Heavenly Venerate you let out a faint sigh and recalled the past. Wei Suifeng also went forward to greet him. Heavenly Venerate you opened 7 stars divine treasure, and has shown great kindness to everyone in the future. Heavenly Venerate you smiled. "I only saw the flaws of Heavenly Venerate Imperial Emperor, Heavenly Venerate Vast Expanse, and Heavenly Venerate Ling and only fixed them slightly. Without such great merit, there's no need for Emperor Yun Luo to be so courteous." Qin Mu explained the sword injuries that Heavenly Venerate Xiao had caused and said, "Eldest senior brother has collected the most Emperor's throne techniques, and Brother Yun is Heavenly Venerate Yun's orthodox successor. You guys are the most suitable to crack the Tao patterns contained in Heavenly Venerate Zhao's sword." Wei Suifeng and Yun Jianli had long known each other in eternal peace. They looked at each other and Wei Suifeng coughed. "Junior brother, you have searched for the geographical maps I left for you, right? Could it be that you didn't find the Emperor's throne techniques that I hid?" Qin Mu's face turned slightly red, and he wanted to muddle through. Wei Suifeng sneered. "You really didn't go. The techniques of the Emperor's thrones were all found by me. My Imperial Guards needed techniques of a higher level, which was why I risked the danger of being exposed and ran to those places to dig around. It took me a long time to dig out the treasures that I had hidden." "You haven't been there at all," Qin Mu mumbled. "I have something more important to do, so I got the ancestral court out." Wei Suifeng's expression softened slightly, and he didn't argue with him about this matter. "I've passed the techniques of the Emperor's throne to Emperor Yanxiu, who found some people with extraordinary talents to build Tao-smelling courtyard. He planned to repair these techniques and change the Divine Bridge into Heavenly River. I'm also among them, and Brother Yun is among them. If you have time, you can go back and repair it together." Qin Mu nodded his head repeatedly, his gaze erratic. Wei Suifeng snorted and knew that he found it troublesome. In fact, Wei Suifeng himself also found it troublesome. Eternal peace reform wasn't as simple as abolishing Divine Bridge divine treasures, but also building with innate Divine Bridge. And all the divine arts of Emperor's throne technique needed to be greatly modified. What was even worse was that after the reform of eternal peace in recent years, all the divine treasures had changed slightly, and there were many details that needed to be modified. Furthermore, even the heavenly palace in the Emperor's throne technique needed to be changed greatly. Ever since founding Emperor split open heavenly court with one sword strike, some of the more daring people of eternal peace had actually started to doubt the system of heavenly palace. They wanted to improve the various realms of heavenly palace, and there had been many results recently. That was how Daowen Academy was built, and it was filled with lawless people. The Dao injuries left behind by Heavenly Venerate Xiao used the Great Dao runes of acquired Great Dao runes. Yun Jianli was already examining Heavenly Venerate Yu's Dao injuries at this moment, and the astonishment on his face became more and more intense. He cried out, "Didn't Heavenly Venerate Xiao cultivate the Dao of innate? Why did his purple firmament jade falling technique fuse with the monarch technique of acquired Great Dao? Because he's the Heavenly Emperor." Qin Mu said from the side. "His innate qi controls all the Great Dao of innate heaven in the world, so he doesn't need to use purple firmament jade falling technique to fuse with the Great Dao of innate heaven." Wei Suifeng and Yun Jianli's expressions changed drastically. "Don't tell me you mean." Qin Mu said solemnly, "That's right. Heavenly Emperor Absolute Beginning wants to unite all the Great Dao of innate heaven, and all the path of acquired heaven in one net in this life. The unification of 10,000 Das?" Everyone in the palace was shocked. Heavenly Venerate Xiao was the reincarnation of Heavenly Emperor Absolute Beginning. His scheme was huge. Before his Heavenly Emperor true body died, he had already reincarnated as a soul, and turned into a young human genius named Xiao Weisu. He took Heavenly Venerate Yun as his master. Later on, he inherited the mantle of Heavenly Venerate Yun and became the leader of the human race. That was during the later period of the Long Han era. This meant that Heavenly Emperor Absolute Beginning had already realized that the path of the acquired realm was about to rise in the later stage of the Long Han era. As such, he had taken precautions and split a soul early to become Xiao Weisu to start his plan. The true rise of the path of the acquired realm wasn't during the later Crimson Light era and Upper Emperor era. At the end of Upper Emperor era, the path of the acquired realm started to sprout, and it truly developed during Founding Emperor era and Eternal Peace era. It became prosperous. Among them, Saint Woodcutter's Heaven's Pavilion had made a great contribution. In other words, Heavenly Emperor Absolute Beginning had seen the scene 400 to 500,000 years later, which was why he was able to plan ahead. Heavenly Emperor Absolute Beginning isn't a pushover either. None of the 10 Heavenly Venerates are good. Everyone thought to themselves. With the help of Wei Suifeng and Yun Jianli, the Tao patterns contained in Heavenly Venerate Zhao's sword were quickly sorted out. Wei Suifeng was knowledgeable and had a wide range of knowledge. He had learned the most about the path of the acquired realm from Saint Woodcutter. Even the path of acquired heaven in Heavenly Venerate Zhao's technique wasn't a problem for him. Yun Jianli was the orthodox successor of Violet Firmament Jade Fall technique. The two of them worked together and complemented each other. After the two of them were sorted out, they had no intention of leaving. They looked at Qin Mu, Apothecary, and Heavenly Venerate Yu with eager eyes, planning to see how they would treat their injuries. Qin Mu was using his divine consciousness to examine the Tao injuries in Heavenly Venerate Yu's primordial spirit. He didn't even raise his head. When we treat them, the 5 Heavenly Venerates who left behind these Tao injuries will be alarmed. I wonder who will make a move here. The expressions of Wei Suifeng and Yun Jianli changed drastically. Wei Suifeng bowed deeply to the ground and said in a clear voice, "Heavenly Venerate, we were abducted by Heavenly Venerate from Daowen Courtyard. There are still some unfinished work in Daowen Courtyard, so I implore Heavenly Venerate to send us back. Where righteousness lies, there's no room for refusal." Yun Jianli said righteously, "Since we have promised Emperor Yanxiu, we must do it beautifully. I implore Heavenly Venerate to send us back to Daowen Courtyard." Heavenly Venerate Yu said gently, "Thank you for your hard work. When you walk out of the palace gate, follow the lights in the peach forest. When you walk out of the peach forest, you will be in Eternal Peace capital city." The two of them felt as if they had been pardoned and rushed out of the palace. As expected, they saw lights in the peach forest. They followed the lights, and when they walked out of the peach forest, they saw that the lights were from Lower Capital City of Eternal Peace capital city. The two of them let out a sigh of relief and hurriedly walked towards Lower Capital City. Yun Jianli couldn't bear it and said, "We left Heavenly Venerate Mu and Divine Medicine King to die there. Aren't we being a little ungrateful?" Wei Suifeng smiled. "Of course we're ungrateful. However, this second junior brother of mine likes to cause trouble, so he won't die. We might not. Let's go, we have important matters to attend to." The two of them entered the capital. In Peach Forest Palace, Qin Mu had finally completed the Tao patterns of Divine Emperor Lang Xian's Path of Divine Consciousness. Apothecary had also prepared portions of spirit medicine. Qin Mu took out Supreme Element Liquid, and the two of them looked at each other without saying a word. Heavenly Venerate Yu waited for a long time, but he still didn't say anything. He couldn't help smiling. Two country hands, why are things so serious at the end of the day? Apothecary bowed slightly. If I were to treat Muir's injuries, let alone 5 types of pills, I would have refined 500 of them and fed them to him. In any case, it wouldn't poison him to death. But treating Heavenly Venerate's injuries, I couldn't help being a little worried. I tried my best not to have any future troubles. Heavenly Venerate Yu couldn't help being filled with sympathy for Qin Mu and said with a smile, "Medicine King God, there's no need to be like this. Will consuming your medicine be worse than my condition today? If it's not bad, feel free to take action." Apothecary agreed. Heavenly Venerate Yu looked at Qin Mu and waited for a moment before bursting into laughter. "Heavenly Venerate Mu, what are you so worried about?" Qin Mu said with a straight face, "I'm thinking about these 5 Heavenly Venerates, who will return to the celestial heavens and who will take action against you. These 5 heavenly venerates are all half dead. Heavenly Venerate Yu jumped in fright and stammered. They are half dead? Qin pondered over it. Heavenly Venerate How wouldn't make a move. He was heavily injured by Supreme Emperor, and didn't dare to return to the heavenly court. Among the 5 heavenly venerates, his injuries were the most serious. Even if Tai Su gave him all her strength, he wouldn't be able to recover for another 1 to 200 years. Furthermore, his divine weapon, Heavenly Venerate Royal, was also smashed into pieces. Heavenly Venerate Fire was heavily injured by Supreme Emperor, Founding Emperor and Lang so he shouldn't be able to recover during this period of time. Furthermore, he had stayed behind to guard Great Void, so he was most likely not in the heavenly court at the moment. His divine weapon, Heavenly Venerate Royal, was left in the South Pole Heaven to suppress it. Heavenly Venerate Moon listened quietly. Qin continued. But if Heavenly Venerate Fire returns to the celestial heavens, he might make a move. After that it's Lang Xian. Lang Xian was heavily injured by Emperor Tai, and was also heavily injured by Heavenly Venerate Shao. His injuries were also extremely serious, so it wouldn't be a problem even if he returned to the celestial heavens. His divine weapon Heavenly Venerate Royal couldn't rush here in a short period of time. The divine weapon Heavenly Venerate Royal of the Ancestor God King is in Xiandu, so he can't descend. The injuries of the Ancestor God King aren't light either. The battle with Supreme Emperor caused his treasure of Heavenly Tao to be almost completely shattered, and he couldn't refine it back in a short period of time. Even if he makes a move, he can't do anything to us. The only thing I'm afraid of is Heavenly Venerate Dawn. He had one of his hands chopped off by Heavenly Concubine Yen, but this fellow is an abnormal one among the 10 Heavenly Venerates. He cultivates the great Tao of acquired heaven, so he's extremely passionate about it. Qin frowned deeply. He's also turning a blind eye to eternal peace reform, he said in a low voice. It's clear that he's also interested in eternal peace reform. Eternal peace inherited Crimson Light's creation technique, so he must have learned it as well. His injuries should have already healed by now. What's more terrifying is that he's Heavenly Emperor's absolute beginning, so I wonder how far his unity of 10,000 paths has cultivated to. Apothecary reminded. Heavenly Venerate Shao still has a primordial wood not far from the Peach Forest. Qin nodded. His divine weapon, Heavenly Venerate Royal, is beside the primordial wood. With Heavenly Venerate Shao of unity of 10,000 paths, Heavenly Venerate Royal and Primordial Wood, he was probably the strongest among the 10 Heavenly Venerates. If he makes a move, will you be able to block him, Heavenly Venerate Yu? Heavenly Venerate Yu thought for a moment and summoned all the palace maids. Take out all the lanterns I've refined over the years, and hang them in the Peach Forest according to this formation map. She took out a formation map and handed it to the palace maid in the lead. After hanging them, return to the palace immediately and don't stay in the Peach Forest. The palace maids acknowledged and went to open the treasury in the palace. They took out a few hundred lanterns and shook them. The lanterns lit up and the palace maids carried the lanterns out of the palace to hang them on the peach trees. Qin stared at them with his eyes wide open. There were a few hundred who linger scratching around in his heart, and he couldn't wait to snatch some of the lanterns. Other people didn't know the benefits of Heavenly Venerate Moon's lanterns, but he knew the wondrous uses of these lanterns. They were even faster than the speed of those Heavenly Venerates. However, this wasn't the greatest effect of the lanterns. They were strong enough to turn into zither strings. Qin had seen Heavenly Master by Yuqiong before, and he had used the zither strings transformed from the lantern to cut off Heavenly Master Hao's finger and even his head. Heavenly Master Yu waved her sleeves, and an ancient zither flew over and landed on her knee. She smiled at the two of them. The 5 great Heavenly Masters are all injured, and Great Emperor has helped me a lot. Why would Great Emperor be so kind? Qin smiled slightly and said leisurely, there's naturally someone pushing the hand behind the scenes to borrow strength. If there wasn't this person behind the scenes, pushing the hand, I wouldn't have dared to come and heal Yuer immediately. Heavenly Venerate Yu looked at him deeply and suddenly smiled. Heavenly Venerate Mu, Divine Medicine King, I'm going to make a fool of myself today. The two of you can refine medicine to heal your injuries, but wait for me to play the zither and meet the heavenly venerate of the heavenly court." She plucked a zither string. The zither string trembled and gave off a crisp sound. In the peach forest under the night sky, the lights of the lanterns suddenly became bright. Light strings shot out from the lanterns. The light strings of the lanterns were connected and crisscrossed. They vibrated along with heavenly venerate Yu's zither string and gave off a beautiful melody. Qin Mu and Apothecary listened to the music of the zither and were slightly entranced, but they soon woke up. Accompanied by the music of the zither, Qin Mu helped Apothecary. He started the fire to control the temperature while Apothecary threw the spirit herbs he had prepared into the pill furnace. In the great hall, the music of the zither was moving and the heaven flames were raging. The huge round pill furnace was spinning on the flames. Under the flames, Qin Mu held the heaven flames with his palm and executed the pill furnace to control the temperature. As the second person in the world to have cultivated the heavenly palace of medicine, his attainments in the path of medicine could be said to be second only to Apothecary. Of course, his heavenly palace of medicine was created by Apothecary using spirit pills, so his attainments in the path of medicine were far inferior to Apothecary's. Apothecary took a step forward with his sleeves fluttering in the wind. Under the illumination of the heaven flames, he took huge steps like a shooting star, and the secrets of pill refinement changed endlessly in his hands. His primordial spirit appeared and sat in the sky above the pill furnace. Apothecary King's primordial spirit was high up in the sky, and he stood tall on God execution platform. His body was tall and sturdy, and two murderous auras surrounded him like dragons. The 10 fingers of Apothecary King's primordial spirit danced, and his vital chi turned into intertwining Tao markings. The marvel of pill refinement was breathtaking. Soon the 5 types of spirit pills were refined. Apothecary shook his sleeves and put away the pill furnace. Qin Mu clenched his 5 fingers, and the heaven flames vanished. Apothecary raised his hand and blocked Heavenly Venerate Moon's screen. It fell to the side, revealing Heavenly Venerate Moon who was playing the zither. Qin Mu and Apothecary looked at each other, and they came to Heavenly Venerate Moon's side. Apothecary took out the first spirit pill, and it flew up. Vital chi rushed into the sky above Qin Mu's head, and Medical Path Heavenly Palace appeared behind his head. His Medicine King primordial spirit also appeared in the Heavenly Palace. He was also wearing a wide robe and wide sleeves, giving off the air of an immortal. Their Medicine King primordial spirit made a move at the same time to stimulate the medicinal energy of the spirit pill. This time Apothecary was the main one, and Qin Mu was the assistant. He was mainly worried that Apothecary's cultivation was lacking, so he was prepared to take over at any moment. Even though Apothecary had already stabilized himself on God execution stage, in terms of the density of his vital chi cultivation, he was still far inferior to Qin Mu. The Tao markings in the spirit pill flew out like a huge poem and flew towards Heavenly Venerate Moon. The spirit pill also gave off a wondrous Tao sound that merged with the zither sound. The Tao markings of the spirit pill came to the top of Heavenly Venerate Moon's head, and touched the Tao injury left behind by the ancestor God King. The might of the heavenly Tao instantly burst forth and the might of the heavens was vast. However, in the next instant the Tao markings in the spirit pill filled the heavenly Tao markings. The Tao markings of heavenly Tao in the Tao injury left behind by the ancestor God King touched the Tao markings of the spirit pill. It was like blood meeting snake venom and rapidly solidified, forming lumps and rotting. Qin Mu couldn't help feeling goosebumps all over his body when he saw this. His scalp went numb and even his bones trembled. This kind of spirit pill wasn't a spirit pill at all but a deadly poison. It could even dissolve the Tao path that others had painstakingly cultivated, and was a deadly poison that could transform their Tao. Don't worry. This spirit pill is only targeted at the Tao injuries left behind by the ancestor God King. Apothecary's voice came at the right time to dispel his fear. Qin Mu composed himself. At that moment Apothecary took out the other 2 spirit pills. One of them flew up to Heavenly Venerate Moon's back, where Heavenly Venerate Vast had left his Tao injuries, and the other to Heavenly Venerate Moon's face, the Tao wounds left by Heavenly Venerate Fire. Another vital chi shot into the sky above Qin Mu's head, and transformed into 2 heavenly palaces. One was Xiantian Heavenly Palace, and the other was Heavenly Palace of Creation. He used Heavenly Palace of Creation to reconstruct Heavenly Venerate Moon's appearance, and let her return to her former appearance. On the other hand, Xiantian Heavenly Palace was because Heavenly Venerate Vast's path of returning to ruins and Xiantian Wan Qi were simply too strong. If apothecary spirit pills didn't have the expected effect, he prepared a backup plan first. The medicinal efficacy of apothecary's 2 spirit pills was unleashed. Qin Mu's body swayed and 3 heads and 6 arms appeared, closely observing the changes of each Dao pattern. At that moment, apothecary took out another spirit pill to treat the Dao injuries that Heavenly Venerate Xiao had caused. Qin Mu frowned and said in a low voice, "Grandpa Apothecary, isn't Heavenly Venerate you as thick-skinned as me? Is she really going to alarm all the Heavenly Venerates in one move?" Apothecary executed the medicinal energy of the spirit pill and said solemnly, "If we alarm the other Heavenly Venerates, we definitely won't be able to hide it from Heavenly Venerate Xiao. Instead of waiting for him to make a move first, we might as well alarm all of them." Qin Mu frowned and his body swayed. Heavenly palaces appeared behind him, forming a heavenly court that shone with divine light. His primordial spirit split into 18 and stood tall in the heavenly palaces, closely observing the changes of the Dao patterns in Heavenly Venerate Moon's Dao injuries. The spirit pill had already begun to erode Heavenly Venerate Zhao's Dao patterns, and the first Dao pattern shattered. The corners of Qin Mu's eyes twitched. The instant the Dao pattern shattered, he sensed something waking up in the origin world. It was like an incomparably terrifying devil monster opening its eyes in the dark night. Heavenly Venerate Xiao was alarmed. Apothecary took out the 5th spirit pill at this moment, and the veins on Qin Mu's forehead bulged out. However, he still endured it and didn't disturb him, allowing him to treat Heavenly Venerate Yu's injuries with all his heart. Heavenly Venerate Yu's zither music was still leisurely and slow. When Qin Mu and Apothecary treated her injuries, the Dao injuries on her body would also retaliate, causing her even more pain. However, her fingers were still very steady. Every finger was very powerful when she plucked the zither strings. At this moment, the Taoists who lived in Dao sect and the people in the city at the foot of the mountain suddenly saw a strange scene. They saw the entire peach forest blooming with various colors of light. The light seemed to float in the sky above the peach forest. The strings of light in the peach forest vibrated along with the sound of the zither in the forest. Hundreds of light strings and the sound of the zither chimed in harmony. It made the peach forest in the dark night seem like a dancing musical note, bathed in light. What was even stranger was that when each musical note jumped, the peach forest seemed to jump from one space to another space. Another world actually appeared in the dark night sky, and was connected to the peach forest. At this moment the Yuan world was dark, but those strange worlds were not all dark. Some were at the moment when the sun rose, and the people near Haotian Taoism saw the sea. 3 smaller suns were slowly rising from the sea. The light of the rising sun shone from the night sky, across the sea, and the peach forest by the shore. From the peach forest, it fell on the Kunlun ruins mountains of Haotian Taoism, like a beautiful picture slowly unfolding. However, as the music notes of the peach forest danced, the scene changed again. They saw a dark world descending. The dark mountains were like the fins on the back of a monster, shocking and terrifying. The music notes danced and suddenly it was daytime again. The sky was clear and blue, and there was a huge continent floating in the sky. Many gods with bird heads and human wings were flying in the sky. Suddenly they came to the world under the setting sun. The setting sun was bright red, and the sunset glow filled the sky. It was extremely beautiful. The 10,000 miles peach forest seemed to be in a jumping space. It was constantly jumping in the myriad worlds. The music notes formed by light strings and music notes formed thousands of jumping space planes, which made the people near Haotian Taoism stare straight at it. Suddenly, an elder in Haotian Taoism looked into the darkness in the distance. He saw that in the distant land, the Yuanwood statue was like a monster standing in the center of the Yuan world in the darkness. And there 2 long and narrow eyes were slowly opening. Those 2 eyes were too big. Even though they were so far away, they could still be clearly seen. The Dao sect elder was shocked. He hurriedly rang the bell and called over the Dao sect disciples. He said in a deep voice, "The Dao master is not here. All of you, quickly go down the mountain and head to the nearby cities. Restrict everyone from leaving the houses and the city. Everyone close the doors and shut the doors. You must not leave. Many of the Tao sect disciples left one after another. The Tao sect elder also went down the mountain to restrict the nearby commoners. He glanced at the eyes that were gradually brightening in the darkness. At this moment he saw that the stars in the sky had unknowingly become much bigger. He could not help but worry. The peach forest, I'm afraid there's a big change. The stars in the sky became brighter and brighter. However, although the strange stars were becoming brighter, they were flickering and flickering, appearing and disappearing at times. It was as if these stars were dancing along with the music notes in the peach forest. They were jumping from one world to another. The stars were chasing after the peach forest. Every time the stars dimmed and disappeared, they would become brighter again. It was as if they had become even bigger, and they were even closer to the peach forest. As the music notes in the peach forest jumped, the Taoist priests who were busy restraining people from all over the cities suddenly noticed that the giant and Yuanmu were moving in the darkness. Although the giant and Yuanmu were still the same size as before and did not seem to be moving, they were only shrinking as they moved. What was even stranger was that the giant grabbed the Yuanmu and pulled it up. He stopped when the music notes in the peach forest jumped, and moved when the music notes stopped. When the notes jumped, the sky above the peach forest lit up. When the giant and the elemental wood were illuminated, the giant and the elemental wood did not move at all. When the notes stopped, the sky above the peach forest fell into darkness. At that time the giant and the elemental wood also disappeared into the darkness. However, the Taoists could feel that the giant in the darkness was hurrying over with the elemental wood. And the strange giant holding on to the origin wood was none other than the divine artifact that suppressed the origin world, Celestial Master Royal. The Taoists of Tao sect felt their hairs stand on end. They quickly flew in all directions, causing everyone to lock their doors tightly. Finally, the bell of Tao sect rang once again. The Taoists flew back to Tao sect and sealed their mountain gates as well. They each returned to their own courtyards or palaces and locked their doors tightly. In the city at the foot of the mountain, a child quietly pushed open the window, intending to look out. However, at this moment he saw an incomparably terrifying scene. A giant with a huge physique was standing outside the city. In his hand was a tree that was 1,000 feet tall. His face was taller than the city tower, and the side of his face appeared above the city tower. The music notes in the peach forest danced, and light shone illuminating his face. The child's mouth was wide open as he watched this scene in a daze. His mother rushed over in a hurry and dragged the devilish child back, closing the doors and windows with a bang. Then the sounds of spanking and the child's screams came from inside the house. The screams immediately became muffled and turned into whimpering sounds. It was likely that someone had covered his mouth. Outside the city, the divine weapon Heavenly Lord's body had already shrunk to over 100 feet tall, but he was still a little taller than the city tower. He stood there like a stone statue. Suddenly, the music notes in the peach forest dimmed, and the city fell into darkness. When the music notes lit up again, the giant was already standing by the side of the peach forest. He still propped himself up on the origin wood and stood there motionlessly. Rustling sounds came from a sudden gust of strong wind that blew against the peach forest. This wind came inexplicably. It was very strong, and it even blew against the sleeves of Celestial Master Royal's clothes. The strange thing was that this gust of wind could even blow against the divine weapon, Celestial Master Royal's clothes, but it could only blow against the peach leaves outside the peach forest. However, the peach leaves inside the peach forest did not move at all. The divine weapon, Celestial Master Royal, held the origin wood in his hand and did not move at all. The stars in the sky also became brighter and brighter. They shone brightly as if they had arrived not far above the peach forest. Among them, 49 big stars were the most dazzling. In the palace of the peach forest, Medicine Master activated the medicinal efficacy of the last spirit pill. The great Tao chain formed by the medicinal efficacy drilled into Heavenly Venerate Yu's glabella. The moment the Tao chain came into contact with Divine Emperor Lang Xian's spiritual sense Tao pattern, it was as if two spirals were entangled together. The battle was brutal. When Divine Emperor Lang Xian's spiritual sense Tao pattern was destroyed, Heavenly Venerate Yu's spiritual sense and Yuan Shan were also attacked. The zither sound emitted from the bottom of her hand suddenly became chaotic. Her zither music was chaotic for half a beat, and the light strings in the peach forest were also half a beat slower at this moment. When the zither music continued, light shone. The divine weapon, Heavenly Venerate Royal, came to the depths of the peach forest with the origin wood in his hand. And that strange gale actually came to the peach forest. The wind blew against the peach wood, and the leaves rustled, and the peach flower petals fluttered in the wind, they danced in the wind. In the sky, the 49 big stars were even more dazzling. They hung above the peach forest palace like 49 eyes, staring at the palace, waiting for the next opportunity. In the 10,000-li peach forest, light strings shuttled back and forth, jumping even faster. The sky also became colorful in an instant. Sometimes it was day, sometimes it was night, sometimes it was pouring rain, sometimes the sun shone brightly, and sometimes it was covered in white snow for 10,000 li. Sometimes it was the blazing sun, the scorching summer sun, or the beautiful spring light, or the red autumn filled the mountains. In a short moment, the peach forest could move from one world to another, from spring to summer, and from winter to autumn. The geography of the mountains, the sun, the moon, and the stars were constantly changing, but strangely, the divine weapon Heavenly Venerate Royal, the origin wood, the strange wind, and the 49 great stars in the sky remained unchanged. In the palace, the music of the zither became more and more rapid. Heavenly Venerate Moon's 10 fingers danced, and the zither strings danced more and more rapidly, as if her 10 fingers could not keep up. Suddenly, Heavenly Venerate You stood up, and the zither flew around her. Heavenly Venerate You stepped on the air and danced in the air. Her legs had unknowingly healed, and she was able to stand up. Her body moved, and so did the zither. The zither flew up, down, left, and right. Clang, clang, clang. A sharp zither sound rang out, and the peach forest palace suddenly fell apart, leaving behind only thick stone pillars. The stone pillars were like forests, like zither pillars. The strings of the zither suddenly flew up and were tied to the zither pillars, one string and one pillar. Heavenly Venerate Moon's figure was graceful as she shuttled between the strings and the pillars. She floated gracefully, but the zither sounds were high-pitched and spirited, carrying a cold killing intent. Apothecary was like a small star that was flying around her. The primordial spirit of the Medicine King stood tall in the heavenly palace, and the heavenly palace of Path of Healing was also flying around Heavenly Venerate Moon to ensure that the Tao patterns in the healing spirit pills weren't messed up. Wang Qin Mu's spirit embryo divine treasure spread out, and the hall actually looked like a vast world. The ancestral court hung in the middle, with Xiandu above and Yudu below. The 4 poles stood in all directions, and all the worlds in the heavens appeared. Qin Mu's primordial spirit rose slowly, and his body grew larger and taller. No matter which direction he looked from, he could only see his face. He was a 4-faced god. The 4-faced god king spread his palm open, and the ruins of the hall were held up by him. The strings of the zither pillar spanned 100 miles, and the ruins of the hall turned into a zither. Heavenly Venerate Moon danced among the strings of the zither pillar. Sometimes she flew past the strings, sometimes under the strings, and sometimes around the pillars. Her long sleeves fluttered as she plucked the strings of the zither. She seemed to have become the 4-faced divine king in Qin Mu's palm, and she could clearly grasp all the details of the peach forest and the zither. The bodies of Apothecary and Medicine King's primordial spirits were even smaller, but they were also like a 4-faced divine king, able to clearly grasp the circulation of every bit of medicinal energy. Heavenly Venerate Mu. A voice sounded out from the peach forest, as if it was sobbing. Qin Mu's heart jumped. It's time to make a move. The origin wood in the hand of divine weapon Heavenly Venerate Royal suddenly fluttered, and in an instant, it pierced through the peach forest. In the sky 49 huge stars fell from the sky. He had forgotten to ask for the monthly pass in the middle of the month. 2 days had already passed. Tears were streaming down his face. Was there still any more? Was there still any more? He threw a piece of paper and patted the pig's head to comfort him. Apothecary's expression changed slightly. He could now see the wounds on Heavenly Venerate Yu's body, back, and even the top of his head. The Tao patterns on the Tao wounds could be clearly seen. Even the Tao patterns on the Tao wounds could be seen clearly. At this moment it was as if he had countless eyes. He could see the front and back of each rune clearly, He could even see the internal structure of the runes clearly. It was actually so simple for him to treat Heavenly Venerate Yu's injuries. If I had this ability, anyone in the world would be poisoned to death. Apothecary was overjoyed. Heavenly Venerate Yu was also in Qin Mu's divine treasure territory. At that moment, she realized that her path of space was unexpectedly smooth, and her divine arts were also surprisingly swift. It was as if she had suddenly entered an unfathomable realm. She plucked the zither strings and unleashed her path of space to an extreme that she had never imagined before. This kind of wondrous usage can unleash my path of space to the extreme. She plucked the zither strings, and the light strings in the 10,000 miles peach forest suddenly trembled. In an instant, the light strings trembled countless times, forming countless floating spaces. They were thin and didn't have any thickness, just like the strings of space. The strings of these spaces burst forth with different rhythms, making the entire peach forest seem to be in the 10,000 worlds at the same time. The strings of these spaces cut open the strange wind and blocked the stars in the sky. They made the roots of the origin wood unable to spread throughout the peach forest, and more roots were cut off. This was the effect of Qin Mu's divine treasures domain. There weren't many people in the world who had cultivated their domains. There was a portion of people in Heavenly Court who had cultivated their domains, and there was also a portion in Eternal Peace. In addition to Carefree Village and Supreme Emperor, that was all. However, everyone who had cultivated their domains had extraordinary achievements. For example, Founding Emperor's sword domain was indestructible. Supreme Emperor's Supreme Divine Consciousness domain could solidify everything. Then there was Luo Wushuang Butcher's Knife domain, and Heavenly Knife domain, which all had extremely powerful might. If one wanted to cultivate their domains, they had to have extraordinary achievements in their cultivation of the Great Tao. Domains were an extension of the system of Tao realm. Qin Mu's path of cultivation was different from the others. The others would open their spirit embryo step by step, opening up 5 elements and 7 stars. On the other hand, he would use his spirit embryo to evolve the universe, opening up heaven and earth. He would evolve Xiandu, Yudu, Yuandu for extreme heavens and even the ancestral court. He didn't have any other divine treasures. In the domain of his divine treasures, he was equivalent to the singularity of the great explosion of the universe. The singularity didn't exist in time and space, so there was no upper, lower, left, or right. Standing in the singularity, one could see everything in the universe, regardless of whether it was the front or the back. Thus, all the time and space in his divine treasures were like the decorative patterns on his palm. When others looked at him, they would never be able to see his back. They could only see the front. Even if they flew to the top of Qin Mu's head and under his feet, they could only see the front. Now that Qin Mu had placed Heavenly Venerate Yu and Apothecary on his palm, he had placed his divine treasures domain on their paths. As a result, Apothecary and Heavenly Venerate Yu also temporarily possessed this unimaginable ability. 49 huge stars fell from the sky and avoided the zither strings that were jumping in the sky. Suddenly, the stars trembled violently and turned into 49 heavenly Tao celestials. Behind one of them floated the heavenly principle, which was like a dolua. A heavenly well was suspended behind one of the celestials. One of the celestials sat on the heavenly Xian. The heavenly Xian was like a chariot. There were heavenly acupoints, heavenly abyss, and other heavenly Tao celestials. The heavenly Tao behind them also appeared. One after another, the celestials descended from the sky to resist the zither music. On the other side, the strange wind whistled and swept up peach branches, peach leaves and peach flowers. Those flowers, branches, and leaves formed a torrent. As the zither music whistled, countless flowers, branches, and leaves rushed to the front of the palace ruins. The branches and leaves flew and danced. They gathered together and formed the figure of Divine Emperor Langxian. The zither music came from all directions and cut Divine Emperor Langxian into pieces. However, the shattered Langxian was broken and gathered together. The petals, branches, and leaves on his body scattered and gathered again. He did not come in his real body, but his divine sense. His real body was severely injured by Supreme Emperor, and he had to return to the heavenly court to recover. Supreme Emperor had injured him too badly, and it would be difficult for him to recover to his peak state in a short time. He was best at dealing with Heavenly Venerate Yu. Back then, he was the first one to attack Heavenly Venerate Yu, and only then did the other heavenly venerates have the chance to severely injure her. His divine sense could be said to be the nemesis of the Tao of space. Heavenly venerate you have lived for so long. More than 40,000 years, right? Divine Emperor Langxian walked over. He said in a clear voice. Back then, you should have died together with Heavenly Venerate Ling. You survived because you were disabled. Only when you were crippled could the Heavenly Venerates be at ease. But now you want to recover? You're clearly courting death. No matter what he did, he could not get close to the palace ruins. He could not help but frown slightly as he looked up at the sky. In the sky, the 49 heavenly Tao celestials each shouted. The 49 heavenly Tao were like long rainbows that fixed the light strings. The power of the zither music was greatly reduced. But even so, Divine Emperor Langxian still could not get close. The 49 heavenly Tao celestials suddenly turned into long rainbows, and descended from the sky along with the long rainbows. They landed on the ground and turned into heavenly Tao celestials. These heavenly Tao celestials all had the same faces, the faces of the ancestor God King. These celestials were the great Tao incarnations of the ancestor God King. Because he was severely injured by Emperor Tai, he had no choice but to return to the heavenly court to recuperate. His true body could not be used. Heavenly venerate you. Stop healing your injuries and recover your crippled body. You still have a way to live, otherwise, don't blame fellow Taoists for being heartless. Heavenly venerate you turned a deaf ear. Suddenly, the heavenly Tao gods could sense that the injuries of heavenly Tao in heavenly venerate you's body were healing rapidly. They couldn't help opening their eyes at the same time, and their gazes landed on Qin Mu's palm and apothecary, who was flying around heavenly venerate you. You've broken my heavenly Tao. You're destined to suffer a calamity. The 49 heavenly Tao gods said in unison. Apothecary's heart tightened, and he hurriedly touched the bronze mask on his face. It was still there, and he let out a sigh of relief. Fortunately, I was afraid that Moore would feel inferior, so I didn't take off my mask. Otherwise, these fellows would have seen my true face. Heavenly venerate Shao, ancestor God King. God Emperor Langxian suddenly said. Even though there are only the three of us today, you shouldn't have forgotten the scene back then, right? Yes, God Emperor 49 Heavenly Tao nodded, and his divine weapon Heavenly Venerate Royal said. Even though Heavenly Venerate Fire was the first to attack back then, Heavenly Venerate Moon managed to dodge his attack. Instead, you were the first to succeed. God Emperor Langxian smiled slightly and suddenly burst forth, shouting, Do it! Whoosh! His body suddenly disintegrated, and countless peach blossoms, leaves and branches danced in the sky. The peach blossoms, leaves and branches shattered in the sound of the zither. But Divine Emperor Langxian's divine sense had already rushed straight into Qin Mu's divine treasure territory. At the same time, the 49 heavenly Tao divine men all made their moves, and in an instant, they formed the world of Xiandu, encompassing Qin Mu's divine treasure territory. The sound of the zither burst forth, and the 10,000 miles peach forest seemed to boil. Countless cross-sections of space interweaved in the sound of the zither. Heavenly Venerate Moon stroked the zither, and all kinds of zither sounds burst forth at the same time. 5 notes and 12 melodies, Gong Shang Jiao Zhengyu, Yellow Bell Great Lu Tai Tuan, they all burst forth at the same time. The world of Xiandu transformed by the heavenly Tao celestials was instantly destroyed, and the celestials flew up before being chopped into pieces by the sound of the zither. Countless broken limbs danced in the sky, and the ancestor God King's voice could be heard shouting angrily, Heavenly Venerate Shao, your grandpa. His broken heavenly Tao was like a 7-colored stream of light that rushed into the sky and rushed out of the peach forest. It jumped back and forth among the stars in the sky and soon disappeared. Divine Emperor Langxian's divine consciousness rushed into the domain of his divine treasure, and went straight for the heart of Heavenly Venerate Yu's brows. However, no matter how he rushed, he was still facing Qin Mu. He was getting closer and closer to Qin Mu. But what welcomed his divine consciousness was Qin Mu's palm. Qin Mu's 5 fingers spread open, and Supreme Emperor's divine art appeared in his palm. It was great overarching supreme divine consciousness. Divine Emperor Langxian's divine consciousness surged and broke through one great overarching heaven. But there was still a second great overarching heaven behind him. He continued to rush forward and broke through one great overarching heaven after another. He broke through 100 great overarching heavens consecutively and finally caught Qin Mu off guard. However, at that moment, he saw a hairpin in Qin Mu's hand. Peachwood hairpin. It was an ordinary hairpin that Heavenly Venerate Moon, who liked peach blossoms, had created for Heavenly Venerate Ling. Langxian, your divine consciousness can break Heavenly Venerate Moon's path of space, but Heavenly Venerate Ling's divine art of not easy can break your divine consciousness. Qin Mu shook the peachwood hairpin, and Divine Emperor Longshuan's divine consciousness instantly crumbled into pieces. At the instant his divine consciousness crumbled, he heard the ancestor god king's cry, and his heart was a little confused. Heavenly Venerate Shao, why didn't he make a move? Qin Mu kept his hairpin, and in a short instant, the ancestor god king and divine emperor Lang Xian both suffered a huge loss. One of the 49 heavenly Tao divine beings was beheaded, and the other's divine consciousness was sliced off. They wouldn't come here again for a short period of time. There was only one person left now. Qin Mu looked at the peach forest, and his divine weapon Heavenly Venerate Royal stood there unmoving, his hands propping up the origin wood. Heavenly Venerate Yu's zither music surged, and the space strings formed by the light strings jumped around him. However, they were all blocked by the origin wood. Heavenly Venerate Divine Weapon Divine Armament's gaze was gloomy, and there seemed to be flames dancing in his eyes as he looked at Qin Mu and Heavenly Venerate Yu. He seemed to be able to see through Qin Mu's divine treasure domain, and accurately catch the flaws of Qin Mu and Heavenly Venerate Yu. Heavenly Venerate Vast's Tao injuries have been healed. Apothecary's voice sounded out and he said, Heavenly Venerate Fire's Tao injuries have also been wiped out. In a moment, the Tao injuries left behind by Heavenly Venerate Shao and Divine Emperor Lang Xian will also be healed. In Qin Mu's 18 heavenly palaces, God King Creation immediately made his move and reconstructed Heavenly Venerate Yu's appearance. Heavenly Venerate Yu's spirit was greatly roused. She could feel that the Tao injuries that restricted her cultivation were gradually losing their power, and her cultivation was returning to its peak bit by bit. At that moment, the sound of footsteps came from outside the peach forest and gradually approached. The reason why I haven't made a move is because I have already taken control of the overall situation, and the life and death of the three of you. In the darkness, a figure passed through the messy intersecting light strings as if it didn't have a physical body. The space strings were indestructible, but when they cut through his body, they didn't hurt him in the slightest. He was like a ball of qi without a physical body. I am not being arrogant. In fact, it is because the origin wood is in my hands. The figure got closer and closer, the voice became clearer. The Earth Mother Yuan Lord is an incompetent person, but her physical body is a supreme treasure born from the ancestral court. It is just that she does not know how to use it. This origin wood root is rooted in the Yuan capital. Its roots and roots are all over the earth. Its branches and leaves lift up the heavens in the sky. Therefore, even if your 10,000 miles peach forest is connected to all the heavens, it's useless to me. It's easy to break. After saying the word break, Heavenly Venerate Royal, who was holding the origin wood, suddenly shouted and activated the power of the origin wood. Heavenly Venerate Moon's expression changed slightly. She immediately felt the 10,000 miles peach forest connecting the heavens, and the 10,000 worlds disintegrating. The peach forest that she had worked hard to build for more than 40,000 years was destroyed in an instant. The peach forest was destroyed, and the origin wood roots were like tentacles that extinguished the lanterns one by one. Back when Heavenly Venerate Hao invaded the Yuan world, Earth Mother Yuan Lord, who had just been resurrected, went to stop him. Because Heavenly Venerate Shao was by his side, Heavenly Venerate Hao did not want to be injured, nor did he want to reveal his true strength. Therefore, after severely injuring Earth Mother Yuan Lord, he left. However, Earth Mother Yuan Lord was killed by Heavenly Venerate Shao. The roots and the origin would fell into Heavenly Venerate Zhao's hands, and the Yuan world fell into Heavenly Venerate Zhao's control. Celestial Master Shao became a big winner, planting the primordial wood and building the Heavenly Palace, leaving behind the divine weapon Celestial Master Royal. At that time, even Qin Mu had fallen into his scheme and summoned his soul, but he couldn't stop eternal peace calamity from erupting. In the end, he had no choice but to give up his identity as Yudu's divine son, and dig out his third eye to become a soulless person. Celestial Master Xiao had always been a big winner, except for the time when he had transformed into Chu Xiao and was assassinated by Heavenly Master Yuan, Heavenly Master Hao, Heavenly Master Yu, and the rest during the wedding. After Heavenly Venerate Divine Weapon, Heavenly Venerate Royal finished all of this, he remained unmoved. At that moment, that figure walked to the front of Heavenly Venerate Divine Weapon, Heavenly Venerate. Compared to Heavenly Venerate Divine Weapon, Heavenly Venerate, his body wasn't tall. Heavenly Venerate Divine Weapon, Heavenly Venerate Royal was a giant, and he looked like an ordinary adult. This figure was Heavenly Venerate Xiao. He had delicate features and was refreshing. Furthermore, both of his hands were complete. It was clear that he had indeed cultivated the profound skill of creation, that eternal peace had improved and could recover his corporeal body. Heavenly Venerate Zhao's sword injury has already been removed. Apothecary's voice came over with joy. Heavenly Venerate Xiao raised his brows slightly and looked at Apothecary, who was wearing a bronze mask. He smiled and said, "So it's eternal peace's jade-faced gentleman, Medicine King God. I've listened to your lecture in eternal peace before." Apothecary's expression changed drastically, and he cried out bitterly in his heart. Heavenly Venerate Zhao's gaze landed on Heavenly Venerate Yu again. He smiled. "Heavenly Venerate Yu, even if you recover, you won't be able to escape the myriad worlds in the heavens. Earth Mother is useless, but I'm not useless. You can use the path of space to cut off Earth Mother's roots and restrict her movements, but I don't care. Origin Wood isn't my corporeal body, so I'm invincible because I'm not reluctant to part with it." Heavenly Venerate Yu fell silent, and the zither music stopped. Heavenly Venerate Zhao's gaze landed on Qin Mu again, and he said indifferently, "Heavenly Venerate Mu, I pinched you once in eternal peace tribulation, but you might not be willing to accept it. Now that I've pinched you again, are you convinced?" "I'm convinced, your grandpa." Qin Mu spat out a mouthful of phlegm and smiled. "When have I ever been convinced?" "Me." Heavenly Lord Zhao's expression darkened. "How rude. Heavenly Lord Mu, you're so angry that you're about to swear. I'm a little disappointed. It seems that I've put too much pressure on you. Today, I'm not here to deal with you but Heavenly Lord Yu. After all, we're still allies. I can use you in some ways, but Heavenly Venerate Yu is not." His gaze fell on Heavenly Venerate Yu, and he stretched out a hand. With a serious expression he said, "As long as Heavenly Venerate Yu is willing to submit, I can let bygones be bygones for the matter of you killing me in the past." He said indifferently, "Don't say that I'm not magnanimous. I'm very magnanimous. Heavenly Duke and Earth Count are unruly and unruly. I can tolerate them, and I can tolerate Heavenly Venerate Yu Hao Ling Yu Hua, and other Heavenly Venerates who have created the path of cultivation after birth. If the postnatal spirit became a god, I could tolerate it too. I could even allow you to establish Heavenly Heavens of Heavenly Han, and Heavenly Heavens of Dragon Clouds and give you power. Even if Heavenly Venerate Mu was reforming in eternal peace, I would still turn a blind eye to it. As the Heavenly Emperor of a generation, my stomach isn't bad, right?" His gaze was sincere. It landed on Heavenly Venerate Yu's face. If it was any other Heavenly Venerate, who do you think would have the stomach of the current 10 Heavenly Venerates? Heavenly Venerate Hao? He can't do it. If he were in my position, he would definitely kill all of you at once and cut off all reform. Divine Emperor Langxian? He can't do it either. He doesn't have such boldness. Heavenly Venerate Fire? He's just a lowly person. He'll lick whoever is strong. Heavenly Venerate Hong is too weak. Concubine Yin Tian herself doesn't dare to stand out and only dares to rely on men. Concubine Chong Tian is Supreme Emperor. He even dares to destroy his own race, let alone all of you. Heavenly Venerate Gong is too arrogant. Heavenly Venerate Su is too dark in his heart, and the Ancestor God King is unbridled. He's not the material to be a Heavenly Emperor," he said leisurely. "Besides, 9 Heavenly Venerates of Long Han, apart from Heavenly Venerate Vast Heaven and Heavenly Venerate Fire, Heavenly Venerate Yun is also very talented. However, he lacks influence and Heavenly Venerate Yu is closed off, so it's difficult for him to become a great being. Heavenly Venerate Moon, you are only suitable to be the logistics, while Heavenly Venerate Ling has a communication barrier. Even though Heavenly Venerate Qin is broad-minded, he is cautious by nature, and is only fit to compete with Heavenly Venerate Vast Heaven for the world. As for Heavenly Venerate Mu, he cast a glance at Qin Mu and said with a smile, too impulsive. Even though he's scheming, he'll sooner or later play himself to death because he's too curious. Qin Mu's face was as black as iron. Heavenly Venerate Xiao smiled. From the ancient times until now, there's someone with a broad mind, magnanimity, methods, responsibility, and magnanimity who can perfectly become the Heavenly Emperor. Feel free to look for him, but I'm the only one from the beginning to the end. It wasn't me who dominated the universe and became the Heavenly Emperor, but the universe that chose me to become the Heavenly Emperor. Heavenly Venerate Yu's cultivation rose, and his aura became stronger and stronger. He said indifferently, "You mentioned the 9th Heavenly Venerate back then and the 10 Heavenly Venerates now. Then what about Heavenly Venerate Royal? Why didn't you mention him?" Heavenly Venerate Royal? Heavenly Venerate Zhao's expression sank slightly. Yes, Heavenly Venerate Royal. Heavenly Venerate Yu stood in the palm of Qin Mu's primordial spirit, and his gaze was bright as he looked at Heavenly Venerate Zhao's face. He said word by word, "You said you had magnanimity, so why didn't you mention Heavenly Venerate Royal? Was it because he was more suitable to be the Heavenly Emperor than you, so you couldn't tolerate him and killed him?" Heavenly Venerate Xiao lowered his brows and chuckled lightly. He muttered, "Heavenly Venerate Royal? I didn't kill him. It was Heavenly Venerate Howard and Yin Tianzi who made the move." Celestial Master Yu raised his eyebrows and was about to speak. Celestial Master Xiao continued to smile. "However, Howard and Yin Dynasty's hibiscus dared to make a move because I instructed them to. I even helped Howard seal the Manchurian cloister to ensure that Heavenly Duke and Earth Count couldn't find out the cause of Heavenly Lord Royal's death." He smiled. That was the first Heaven's Grand Meeting. At the Heaven's Grand Meeting, the magnates gathered to discuss the establishment of the Longhan Heavenly Court. They respected me as the ruler of the world. I was high and mighty. At that time the human race was just an insignificant small clan. The Jade Lake Grand Meeting was just an insignificant corner of the Heavenly Court, and the 7th Heavenly Venerate was just an insignificant small figure in that era. Heavenly Venerate Royal was just one of the stronger ants. However, I was afraid. Heavenly Venerate Yu clenched his fists. Heavenly Lord Xiao said, "I have no more opponents." The Supreme Emperor was defeated. The original stone shattered and he became a stray dog. Gong Gong died and was buried by me in the ancestral court. The Heavenly Duke has something on me that the Earth Mother cannot handle alone. The Earth Count is no match for me. As for the 4 ancient gods, they are only worthy of one side. However, when I saw Heavenly Lord Royal, I was afraid. He turned his head to look at the divine weapon behind him, Heavenly Lord Royal, and recalled the past. After a moment he turned his head. He continued, "Heavenly Lord Royal has talent. His talent is peerless. He opened the spirit embryo divine treasure, allowing all living beings to cultivate. He made all races remember his kindness. He also had ambition. He made many good friends. Whether it was the demigods or the postnatal races, they all treated him as a distinguished guest. He also created the divine ascension technique, giving the demigods and postnatal races the hope of being on par with, or even surpassing the ancient gods. At first, I only noticed him and was very tolerant of everything he did. He was just a talented child. Later, when Howard told me about his divine ascension technique, I felt a deep sense of fear." Heavenly Venerate Xiao sighed. "No matter how he spreads his God ascension spell, he will accumulate a great force, a righteous great force. Heavenly Venerate Yu, Heavenly Venerate Mu, you guys aren't Heavenly Emperors, so it's hard for you to understand this great force. You guys have seen dynasties fighting for hegemony and dynasties changing, but have you ever seen a person's great force accumulate to the extreme, and the world will return to one heart? The path that Heavenly Venerate Yu walked is this kind of path." Qin Mu and Heavenly Venerate Yu were slightly stunned. Apothecary, who was treating Heavenly Venerate Yu's final injuries, was also listening attentively. Heavenly Venerate Xiao said, "During the Jade Lake feast, he already had all the conditions for this path. Reputation, supporters, and the future. He had them all. The only thing he lacked was ability. Think about it, after hundreds of thousands of years, the demigods and postnatal beings would grow stronger. With hundreds of existences on Emperor's throne realm, who would they support as their leader? Celestial Master Royal, only Celestial Master Royal. This is the great force he has accumulated, the great force that is fair and just. Qin Mu and Celestial Master, you thought about it carefully. If Celestial Master Royal didn't die at that time, the demigods and humans would be at peace, and everyone would respect him as their leader. The scene Celestial Master Shao had mentioned would indeed appear hundreds of thousands of years later. It would be an incomparably prosperous era, and all the ancient gods would become supporting characters. At that time, Heavenly Venerate Royal didn't even need to make a move. He only needed to point at the throne of Heaven Court and say, "I want to sit on that throne." Heavenly Venerate Shao was expressionless. "I have to stand up and let him sit on it," he said indifferently. "If I didn't stand up and give way to him, there would be countless demigods and postnatal divine saints rushing up to kill me without him making a move. The future I saw is like this. Hence," Qin Mu said, "hence Heavenly Grandmaster Royal must die." Heavenly Grandmaster Shao nodded. Heavenly Grandmaster Royal must die. This was a righteous path of seizing power. It was the way of the king and the way of the emperor. There was no need for any schemes, no need to seize power. As long as Heavenly Grandmaster Royal was given time, he would naturally stand at the peak of power. Anyone who stood in his way would be easily destroyed and buried. The general trend is irresistible. Heavenly Venerate Shao was in existence with great wisdom. He could see the future hundreds of thousands of years later in Heavenly Venerate Royal's body. He saw the rise of postnatal races and demigods that couldn't be stopped, and he also saw the decline of ancient gods. He couldn't stop this trend, but for the sake of his ruling position, for the sake of the ancient gods' ruling position, he had to kill Heavenly Venerate Royal. As long as he didn't have Celestial Master Yu, he could still become the ruler of the world. Qin Mu thought about it, and when he looked at all the methods of Celestial Masters, including existences like Heavenly Duke, Earth Count, and Earth Mother Primordial Lord, they were all inferior to Celestial Master Yu. Even the path of unity, vertical and horizontal that Qin Mu was walking now was far inferior to Celestial Master Yu. The path of unity, vertical and horizontal had more schemes and plots, and more people scheming. It wasn't as magnanimous as Celestial Master Yu. The road that Celestial Emperor walked was the path of kings and the path of emperors. It was a pity that the ancient god Heavenly Emperor had realized his strength at the first moment and killed him. He had been defeated because he was too outstanding, but his abilities hadn't caught up. Heavenly Emperor Absolute Beginning had a huge stomach and could tolerate countless people. He could even tolerate the Heavenly Duke, Earth Count Emperor and Yuanmu. He could also tolerate Qin Mu, who had repeatedly tripped him. However, as long as it threatened his power, he couldn't tolerate it. If it threatened his power, he would eradicate anyone, even his son. The Dao injuries left behind by Divine Emperor Lang Xian have also healed. Apothecary suddenly said in joy. Heavenly Venerate Yu's spirit was greatly roused, and she executed her technique with all her strength. She instantly felt that the circulation of her technique was smooth and unimpeded, and she had the confidence to take a gamble. Heavenly Venerate Shao looked at her and shook her head. You can no longer escape. Even if you are standing in Heavenly Venerate Mu's domain, you cannot escape from my control. Heavenly Venerate Yu took a deep breath. Her sleeves gradually fluttered as ribbons slowly moved in the air. Along with the ribbons, there were streaks of brilliant divine light. Heavenly Venerate Shao raised her brows. The divine artifact behind her, Heavenly Venerate Royal, held onto the origin wood and lightly spun it. Immediately, the myriad worlds in the Yuan world shifted along with the movement of the origin wood's branches, leaves, and crown. Even Earth Mother Primordial Lord hadn't been able to achieve such a formidable power back then, but Heavenly Venerate Shao could. The shift of all the heavens in 10,000 worlds in the origin world caused space to change. Heavenly Venerate Zhao's goal was to disrupt space and make Heavenly Venerate Yu unable to escape. Qin Mu spread his fingers and spread his palms out. Heavenly Venerate Yu danced in his palms. Her posture was graceful, and space strings appeared one after another. These space strings were plucked by the moving all the heavens in 10,000 worlds. They gave off a chaotic zither sound. Heavenly Venerate Yu's body danced on the space strings, but no matter how she jumped, she couldn't jump out of the 10,000 worlds in the heavens. She couldn't leave the origin world, and she couldn't even leave the peach forest. She could feel the space she could move in getting smaller and smaller, to the point where she was only the distance of Qin Mu's palm. Clang! 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 The strings of space trembled violently, and countless attacks suddenly struck Heavenly Venerate Xiao and Divine Weapon, Heavenly Venerate Royal from all directions. Heavenly Venerate Xiao's body remained unmoving, and Divine Weapon Heavenly Venerate Royal let out a low shout. Suddenly, his body swayed and 3 heads and 6 arms appeared. His fists struck out in all directions, shattering Heavenly Venerate Yu's attacks. He took a step forward and punched out with a majestic aura. It shattered Qin Mu's divine treasure domain, and went straight for Heavenly Venerate Yu in the center of Qin Mu's primordial spirit palm. His punch wasn't aimed at Qin Mu, but at Heavenly Venerate Yu. However, the surging and majestic power acted on the domain of Qin Mu's divine treasure, causing it to float and shatter. In the domain, the stars were destroyed, Xiandu disintegrated, and Yudu didn't exist. Even the ancestral court had fallen into earth, water, wind, and fire, about to be annihilated. The divine weapon Heavenly Venerate Imperial was too powerful. He had used Origin Wood to trap Heavenly Venerate Yu, and used his unparalleled corporeal body to slaughter his way into Qin Mu's divine treasure domain. This kind of tyrannical attack made people despair. At that moment, Qin Mu's body swayed, and a door stood up behind him. Sky-bearing was connected to the earth, and behind the door was Yudu. Heavenly Venerate Xiao raised his eyebrows, and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. The door of Sky-bearing opened, and in the darkness behind the door, paper boats with lanterns hanging on them gathered. The number of paper boats increased, and all of a sudden, they merged into a small boat that sailed over from Yudu. It passed through the gate to Heaven-bearing. A skinny old man on the small boat raised his head, and his bony hand stretched out to meet the palm of the divine weapon Celestial Master Royal. Boom! A terrifying throbbing erupted, and layers of heavenly palaces suddenly appeared behind the divine weapon, forming a magnificent heavenly court. The power of this divine weapon soared, and it actually pushed the skinny old man into the gate to Heaven-bearing. Heavenly Lord Yu, although you are also a heavenly lord, you are no longer in the center of power in the heavenly court. You have too little contact with all sorts of divine arts and mantras. Heavenly Lord Xiao remained standing there, not moving at all. He smiled and said, "You are outdated." That old man was Heavenly Lord Yu. Just as he was about to fall back to Yudu, an incomparably huge palm reached out from behind him and lifted up Heavenly Lord Yu. Behind that palm was a pair of huge eyes that were burning like Yudu's devil fire. A third eye then appeared and looked at the origin world through Yudu. After that palm lifted Heavenly Venerate Yu up, it transformed into a fist that blasted through the gate of heaven influence to meet the divine weapon Heavenly Venerate Royal head-on. At the same time, Heavenly Venerate Yu flew out from Qin Mu's palm. Light strings spread out in all directions and wrapped around the crown of the origin tree. His divine arts completely erupted. Heavenly Venerate Xiao raised his eyebrows and smiled. His long body rose, and he landed on the shoulder of divine weapon Heavenly Venerate Royal, who was staggering backward. He gave a low shout, and a heavenly palace leaped out from the back of his head and filled it into Heavenly Venerate Royal's heavenly palace. There were 35 heavenly palaces in the heavenly palace behind Heavenly Venerate Royal's head, and when his heavenly palace was filled in, it instantly formed a perfect great heavenly palace with 36 heavenly palaces. He was not able to cultivate to the heavenly court level, and he was still lacking a heavenly palace. Therefore, he could only borrow divine weapon Heavenly Lord Royal's body, and use his own innate heavenly palace to make up for his lack, barely reaching the heavenly court level. By doing so, his strength would instantly reach the same level as when he was at his peak, but there was also a huge hidden danger. His physical body could not withstand it. However, it wasn't his corporeal body that was executing the great heavenly court, but divine weapon Heavenly Venerate Royal. This heavenly palace filled up the entire heavenly court, and in an instant divine light burst forth. 10,000 rays of light cried out in unison, and the light was extremely dazzling. Apothecary felt pain in both of his eyes, and both of them instantly went blind. Panic filled his heart, and he suddenly felt himself being swept up by someone. He couldn't help flying out. My eyes! Apothecary was flustered. When he sensed Qinmu's aura, he knew that Qinmu had saved him at the first moment. However, his eyes were already blind, and he couldn't see anything outside. He could only feel that he was constantly bumping. He had also cultivated black technique of creation, but Apothecary's black technique of creation wasn't very brilliant. Usually, when he used black technique of creation to speed up the ripening of spirit herbs, he would at most use black technique to repair his face perfectly. He had not tried to repair his own eyes yet. He activated the black art and gradually felt that his eyes had regained a little of their vision. He could vaguely see that the bones of Earth Count's huge palm, which had reached out from Yudu, were broken. One by one, incomparably thick fingers left his palm and flew into the air. He also saw the branches of the origin wood flying around under Heavenly Venerate Moon's attack. The branches and leaves were fluttering. Apothecary moved his eyes with great difficulty and saw Heavenly Venerate You standing on the shoulder of Divine Weapon, Heavenly Venerate Royal, fighting with Heavenly Venerate Xiao and retreating step by step. His heart went cold. Heavenly Venerate Zhao's great heavenly court system had already been formed and was actually so powerful. At that moment he could focus his gaze on Qinmu, who was blocking in front of him. He dug out the vertical eye in the heart of his brows. Muir, what are you doing? Apothecary asked, but he couldn't hear his voice. He only saw Qinmu execute the vertical eye and sacrifice it in midair. The vertical eye instantly enlarged and the eyeball turned over, revealing half a huge eggshell. Qinmu held Heavenly Venerate Ling's hairpin and executed the divine art of not easy, placing the hairpin on the back of the eggshell. Heavenly Venerate Xiao had already suppressed Heavenly Venerate You, and his divine weapon Heavenly Venerate Royal was actually about to charge into Yudu. At that moment the eggshell behind Qinmu's eye shone brightly. The eggshell of primordial chaos floated up, and countless primordial runes shot out from Qinmu's vertical eye. With a wung sound, they imprinted themselves all over the 10,000 miles peach forest. Countless runes rotated, and with a whoosh they entered Qinmu's vertical eye. The divine weapon Heavenly Venerate Royal fell to the ground, and the divine consciousness magic power in Heavenly Venerate Royal's body whizzed out, and was pulled into the eyeball. Heavenly Venerate Xiao couldn't help flying up, and he couldn't help flying toward the vertical eye. Absolute beginning, if you anger me, I'll beat you back to the state you were before you were born. Qinmu shouted out, and inexplicable fear rose in Heavenly Venerate Zhao's heart. Qinmu's sudden attack was something he had never expected. He had wanted to take this opportunity to subdue Heavenly Venerate You and defeat Heavenly Venerate You so that Earth Count would know the difficulty and retreat. He didn't dare to have any other thoughts. With his current abilities he could do it. If he could subdue Heavenly Venerate You, defeat Heavenly Venerate You, and make these two great Heavenly Venerates submit to him, he wouldn't need to hide his identity among the 10 Heavenly Venerates. With his strength, making Heavenly Venerate Fire submit to him, and his illegitimate son Lang Xian submit to him would not be a problem. In addition to the ancient god lineage, the Heavenly Duke and Earth Count did not dare to compete with him. Black Tortoise, Azure Dragon and White Tiger were easily subdued. Who else would dare to oppose him? The Supreme Emperor would only continue to hide, or else he would die if he came out. Heavenly Venerate How could only obediently be a son. The ancestor god king only dared to scold his father, and did not dare to be impudent. He used him as a blade to restrict the Heavenly Duke, and Heavenly Venerate Void to restrict the Earth Count. Founding Emperor Qinyi could only obediently hide in Carefree Village, and didn't dare to show his face. As for the Empress and Prime Minister, they could only obediently be his women and didn't dare to have any second thoughts. The situation was great. As long as he subdued these two Heavenly Venerates, he would be able to return to the throne. However, Qinmu's strike made him feel fear. When he executed it, he felt his primordial spirit palpitating and the great Tao humming. He couldn't help wanting to return to the eggshell. The substances in his body were also changing, making it almost impossible for him to suppress them. His corporeal body didn't belong to his original self, and was only a reincarnation. However, his primordial spirit was one with his corporeal body. His primordial spirit and great Tao were imprinted into Qin Mu's eye, and he flew toward it as well. More importantly, Qin Mu had pulled back his magic power and divine consciousness from divine weapon Heavenly Venerate Royal in one go, causing him to lose control. Celestial Master Imperial was his most powerful weapon at the moment, and it was even stronger than his corporeal body. Losing this divine weapon immediately put him in a passive position. More well done. Apothecary was overjoyed.
Bang!
Qin Mu's head suddenly exploded, and everything above his neck flew away. Blood splattered all over Apothecary's face, and he was stunned. Along with Qin Mu's head was the vertical eye, including the spirit embryo divine treasure, hidden in the heart of Qin Mu's brows. Spirit embryo divine treasure was located in the heart of the brows of divine arts practitioners and gods. Celestial Venerable Shao poked Qin Mu's vertical eye and head with his finger. The power of his strike was too strong, and even Qin Mu's spirit embryo divine treasure couldn't withstand it, so it exploded as well. The instant the vertical eye and spirit embryo divine treasure exploded, countless treasures flew in the sky.
Där var tai sunnuntai divine stones, tai chi divine stones, tai shi divine stones, and tai shi primordial stones.
There were also mountains of ancestral court divine gold or a big bow, half of an absolute beginning eggshell, 2 tai eggshells, and chaotic chi. Another round and round egg of absolute incipient divine stone flew out. Apart from that, there were the Tai Chi Raw stone from the divine eye, the shattered Qin continent, and Madame Yuan Mu's crystal coffin. When the crystal coffin was broken, Madame Yuan Mu's corpse also flew out. Madame Yuan Mu's corpse had already given birth to a corpse demon, and it had been suppressed by Wei Suifeng's seal all this while. Now that it was free, it ran out in joy. As for the other treasures, there were countless of them, dazzling everyone's eyes. Heavenly Venerate Shao pointed at Qin Mu's head and vertical eye, and only then did he let out a sigh of relief. He withdrew his magic power and divine consciousness and stretched out his hand to grab his eggshell. No matter what, I must get my eggshell. Heavenly Venerate Mu's other treasures aren't bad either. This brat has plundered so many treasures. And that fellow Taoist in the divine egg is also with him. His divine consciousness and magic power surged toward Heavenly Venerate Royal, the divine weapon that had collapsed behind him, while his palm enveloped all the treasures that had exploded in Qin Mu's head. Just as he was about to succeed, the world suddenly spun. All of Qin Mu's treasures were moved by Heavenly Venerate Moon, and hidden in the depths of the space. For a moment, Heavenly Venerate Shao couldn't find where they were hidden. His divine consciousness and magic power were about to rush into Heavenly Venerate Royal's body when Heavenly Venerate Yu, who was originally standing on his shoulder, immediately pasted a yellow paper on the back of his heart. Celestial Master Yu gave a light shout, and the yellow watch paper split into 2, 2 into 4, and 4 into 8. In an instant, the divine weapon Celestial Master Royal was pasted all over, and his entire body was covered in yellow watch paper. Celestial Master Zhao's divine consciousness and magic power were unable to drill into it, and his heart jumped. He immediately knew that he had been plotted against by Qin Mu, and he had completely lost the upper hand. Whoosh! Earth Count's severed hands came smacking over, and the severed fingers that had been flying in the sky rolled back to his palm. Heavenly Venerate Zhao's face was gloomy, and he let out a long howl as he raised his hand to meet Earth Count's hand. Heavenly palaces appeared behind his head, and they linked together to form a huge heavenly court. There were 35 heavenly palaces in this heavenly court, and the heavenly court that was formed by 35 heavenly palaces allowed his magic power to soar. Even though it wasn't as strong as divine weapon Heavenly Venerate Royal, it was still no small matter. It was definitely not inferior to the strength that Heavenly Lord Haoyan had displayed during the battle with the Supreme Emperor. However, the moment he collided with the palm of the Earth Count, he still felt an invincible power coming from it, forcing him to take 2 steps forward. He took advantage of the momentum and rushed toward the origin wood. As long as he had the origin wood in his hand, it was equivalent to him using the Earth Mother Yuanjun at his peak as a divine weapon. The reason why the Earth Mother Yuanjun was unable to display his own strength was not clear to even the Earth Mother Yuanjun himself, but Heavenly Lord Shao knew it very well. The Earth Mother Yuanjun was a huge tree that was born in the ancestral court. The heaven and earth spirit root was watered by the creators with the primordial chaos primordial liquid from the ancient jade pool. It absorbed the heaven and earth spirit energy from the ancestral court, giving birth to life and becoming the earth mother. She was blessed by the heavens and was a god born from the most powerful heaven and earth. However, it was also because the origin wood was too tall and huge that the creators in the ancient times had the custom of worshipping the origin wood. Hence, they worshipped this origin wood, and gathered the worshipping power of millions of creators into the Earth Mother's body. Therefore, although the Earth Mother was born from heaven and earth, it had also absorbed the worshipping power of the Creator and became impure. This was the biggest reason that restricted the Earth Mother itself. The Heavenly Emperor was also restricted like this in the past. Although this worshipping power could allow the recipient to grow quickly and obtain great power, it would also cause the recipient's great doubt to be impure and even affect their consciousness. It would affect their own judgment. For example, Heavenly Emperor Absolute Beginning was wise and divine back then. After he received the sacrificial power, he slaughtered his own race. However, Heavenly Emperor Absolute Beginning, who was an ancient god that gave birth to eggs, also received the sacrificial power from the Absolute Beginning Divine Stone, and the Absolute Beginning Raw Stone from the Absolute Beginning Mineral Vein. If the origin wood fell into his hands, he would be able to unleash the power of the origin wood to the extreme. It was even more tyrannical than the Earth Mother's own strength. If the Earth Mother's strength was fully unleashed, she would definitely not be weaker than an existence like the Duke of Heaven and Earth Count. Just as his palm was about to grab the origin wood, Earth Count and Heavenly Venerate Yu's attacks followed closely behind. In the shadow under Heavenly Venerate Zhao's feet, Heavenly Venerate Yu was like a mirror of him, walking with him. When the two of them took their first step at the same time, Heavenly Venerate Zhao's palm had already touched the body of the origin tree. However, in the next moment, he discovered that his primordial spirit had fallen into Yudu, coming to the side of Heavenly Venerate Yu. Heavenly Venerate Yu held a lantern in his hand. The light from the lantern shone brightly, and a pillar of light smashed onto Heavenly Venerate Zhao's primordial spirit. Boom! An incomparably terrifying ripple spread out from Yudu. All the demon gods and demon kings in Yudu were abnormally frightened and fled in all directions. At the center of that terrifying ripple, Heavenly Venerate Zhao's primordial spirit roared and blocked Heavenly Venerate Yu's attack head-on. He forced himself out of Yudu and returned to his own body. However, Celestial Master Yu's zither strings greeted him. Celestial Master Yu's zither strings had already wrapped around the tree body. The other end of each zither string was connected to Celestial Master Yu's 10 fingers. The first zither string was plucked. Before Celestial Master Shao could react, this zither string had already brushed past his throat. He did not feel any pain. The first zither string flew out from the back of his neck, followed by the second, third, and fourth. 10 zither strings consecutively sliced through Celestial Master Zhao's throat, forehead, lower neck, eyes, chest, waist, vital gate, hip bone, knee joint and ankle joint. Celestial Master Zhao's skull flew up, and the rest of his body was blasted apart by the violent qi and blood before forcefully closing back together. In the gate of heaven-bearing, Earth Count's palm slammed down fiercely, shattering his flesh into a paste. Heavenly Venerate Yu heaved a sigh of relief, and Earth Count and Yudu also heaved a sigh of relief. Heavenly Venerate Yu came to the tree from Yudu, and upon seeing this, he also heaved a sigh of relief. At this moment, Heavenly Venerate Zhao's flesh and blood squirmed and regenerated. He reached out his hand and grabbed the origin wood, lifting it up. At this moment, an incomparably terrifying power erupted from the origin wood, causing the heavens to tremble and the myriad worlds to roar. There were more than 10,000 worlds in the Yuan world. No matter how dull the living beings in these worlds were, they could sense that this night sky was unusual. The heavens they were in were moving rapidly. The stars were in chaos, the earth trembled, volcanoes spewed, hurricanes howled, the seas churned, and tsunamis were incessant. What they did not know was that this was the shocking destruction caused by a celestial master using great mana to manipulate the origin wood. The movement of the origin would cause the heavens to be in chaos. Whoosh! The attack of the origin would send Celestial Master Yu flying. He was in midair vomiting blood non-stop. Celestial Master Shao succeeded in his attack, and used the origin wood as a sword to stab at Celestial Master Yu. Celestial Master Yu retreated rapidly. Her body leaped through space after space. In an instant, she passed through layers of heavens to avoid the attack of the origin wood. However, what shocked her was that the space of the myriad worlds in the heavens was in chaos. No matter how many worlds she passed through, the crown of the origin wood was still in front of her. Shwa shwa shwa. The countless branches of the origin wood were like swords that expanded crazily as they stabbed at her. Heavenly Venerate Yu executed her space divine art, and it was like a hurried zither melody that collided with the crown of the origin wood. However, the sword skill that Heavenly Venerate Xiao used came from Eternal Peace. It was a sword skill that had been modified by Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor and Qin Mu. From Sword 14 to Sword 19 there was everything. Even if Heavenly Venerate Yu was proficient in the path of space, it would still be difficult for her to block such a swift and changeable sword skill. Boom! Her body crashed through the heavens and flew past them. Behind her were millions of green sword lights that were like dancing flood dragons in the sky. Their length could stretch across the heavens and was incomparably astonishing. Heavenly Venerate Yu turned her head. With a chi sound, an origin wood branch pierced through her cheek, leaving a wound. Seeing that she could not withstand it, the Earth Count's attack came behind Heavenly Venerate Xiao. The huge hand turned into a fist and was about to smash Heavenly Venerate Xiao into pieces again. Heavenly Venerate Xiao pulled back the origin wood. The roots of the origin wood gathered together like an enormous black hammer, and met the Earth Count's fist with a hammer. The power of the two exploded. Earth Count, who was in the distant Yudu, frowned. His huge fist floated and turned into pieces of land that cracked open. Old brother, if you don't descend with your true body, you're no match for Earth Mother and me. Fighting with you across the boundary is boring. Why don't we have a real fight? Heavenly Venerate Xiao roared. The roots of the origin wood became a hammer that pierced through the gate of sky bearing and smashed fiercely at Earth Count. The third eye between Earth Count's brows opened, and he was truly enraged. The countless continents formed by his right hand flew back and formed a palm. He stretched out his hand and grabbed, and the sticks that had disappeared for a long time reappeared. Earth Count shook the stick's whip, and just as he was about to fight with him, another divine weapon, Heavenly Venerate Royal, who was floating in Yudu, suddenly opened his eyes and looked at him. Earth Count was shocked. My daughter noticed this. He was on guard against Heavenly Master Royal's divine weapon, Heavenly Master Su. The origin wood sledgehammer had already smashed down fiercely. Just as Heavenly Master Xiao was about to succeed, Heavenly Master Yu suddenly appeared in the sky above Heavenly Master Xiao. On his head and feet, he was like a rapidly falling fairy. His clothes fluttered in the wind, and he waved his 10 fingers. Clang clang clang. Light strings interweaved into a net in all directions. This place was completely sealed. More light strings interweaved and interweaved, forming countless spatial sections that looked like a maze. Heavenly Venerate Xiao, I banish you today. Heavenly Venerate Yu's palm landed on the first string. The first sound of the zither was heard. Suddenly, all the light strings vibrated at the same time, and the 5 notes and 12 tones exploded at the same time. Countless spatial sections were in chaos. The violent spatial turbulence swept up Heavenly Venerate Xiao along with the origin wood with a whoosh, and sent them into the depths of the space. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Thick roots shot out from the chaotic space and took root on the land of the Yuan world. The zither music in the chaotic space was chaotic, but it could not completely push the origin wood into the chaotic space. Celestial Master Xiao stood on the origin wood and ran along the roots. Just as he was about to jump out of the chaotic space, Celestial Master Yu suddenly appeared in front of the chaotic space entrance with a lantern in his hand. The lantern shone on Celestial Master Xiao. The terrifying power hit Celestial Master Xiao's primordial spirit and forced it out of his body. Celestial Master Xiao roared and forcefully pulled his primordial spirit back. Celestial Master Yu clenched his teeth and urged the lantern with all his might. The light became brighter and brighter, but Celestial Master Xiao's primordial spirit forcibly withstood the impact of the lantern and approached his body step by step. On the roots, Celestial Master Xiao's body also took a step forward, following the thick roots step by step. Celestial Master Yu landed in front of the entrance of the space cave. His skirt spread out in all directions and he sat on the ground. The ruins of the palace flew over and shrunk into a guqin. Celestial Master Yu played in front of the cave, and countless attacks rained on Celestial Master Zhao's body and Yuan Shun. Celestial Master Xiao shrieked and suddenly appeared with 3 heads and 6 arms. His Yuan Shun also appeared with 3 heads and 6 arms. His body and Yuan Shun were broken and gathered together, one piece after another. Both Celestial Master Yu and Celestial Master Yu were shocked. Even if the Red Emperor and the Bright Emperor combined, they might not be able to do this. The two of them thought to themselves at the same time. Heavenly Venerate Xiao blocked the attacks of the 2 Heavenly Venerates and walked out step by step. "Where's Earth Count?" Heavenly Venerate Yu asked loudly. Heavenly Venerate Yu gritted his teeth. "He's blocked by Heavenly Venerate Void." Heavenly Venerate Yu's heart sank. Earth Count couldn't descend with his true body, so he couldn't help them. With just the 2 of them, they might not be able to banish Heavenly Venerate Xiao. He might even kill his way out of the chaotic space and heavily injure them. "Moor, don't go." Apothecary's voice sounded out, and Heavenly Venerate Yu and Heavenly Venerate Yu were astonished. Suddenly they saw the headless Qinmu flying over, and the peachwood hairpin in his hand pointed at Heavenly Venerate Xiao, who was about to rush out of the chaotic space. Heavenly Venerate Xiao was astonished, and he quickly retreated. The roots of the origin wood were quickly retrieved from the land of origin world. He was sent into the chaotic space along with his primordial spirit and origin wood, and his whereabouts were unknown. Heavenly Venerate Yu let out a sigh of relief and stood up to put the ancient zither to one side. With a wave of his sleeve, the hole in the chaotic space instantly disappeared, and the space returned to its original state. Qinmu still pointed at the hole in the chaotic space with an awe-inspiring air, but there was no head on his neck. Apothecary hurriedly flew over to check Qinmu's neck and grumbled. "Your neck is filled with Dao injuries left behind by Heavenly Venerate Xiao, and you're still running around. I'm fine." Qinmu stiffened his neck and a voice came from his chest. Where's my eggshell? Give me the eggshell and I'll send Heavenly Venerate Xiao back into the egg." Heavenly Venerate Xiao has already been banished by Heavenly Venerate Yu. Apothecary said helplessly. "Furthermore, don't talk to the air. I'm here and Heavenly Venerate Yu is behind you. This injury of yours is a little difficult to treat." Heavenly Venerate Yu went forward to check on Qinmu's injuries, only to see that his head had disappeared and only his neck was left. Furthermore, there were Dao markings left behind by Heavenly Venerate Zhao's strike on the wound, continuously destroying his bodily functions. His injuries were extremely serious. His primordial spirit had even lost his head, and just like him, his neck was also covered with Dao injuries. Apothecary was swiftly suppressing Qinmu's Dao injuries. The current Qinmu was only strong on the outside but weak on the inside. With Heavenly Venerate Zhao's Dao injuries, he couldn't even use Heavenly Venerate Zhao's divine art. Forcing Heavenly Venerate Xiao back just now was just a bluff. Even if he could use Heavenly Venerate Zhao's divine art, his Dao injuries would still be there, and his head would still explode. He had to get rid of his Dao injury before he could execute the divine art of not easy to recover his spirit embryo divine treasure, or use the profound skill of creation to grow his head. Divine Medicine King, is Heavenly Venerate Mu's injury dangerous? Heavenly Venerate Yu asked in a low voice. "He won't die." Apothecary examined the wound on his neck carefully and said with some difficulty, "It's just that I don't understand the Dao markings left behind in Heavenly Venerate Zhao's Dao injury, so I need Heavenly Venerate to guide me." Heavenly Venerate Yu went forward and shone the lantern on Qinmu's neck. He saw that Qinmu's throat was still breathing, so he relaxed. "I won't die." Heavenly Venerate Yu, where did you banish Heavenly Venerate Xiao to? Heavenly Venerate Yu analyzed the Dao markings in Qinmu's Dao wound in detail. "Back then my cultivation had some achievements and I wanted to test the art of space, so I ran around everywhere. I even liked to use space divine arts to test everywhere. One time I accidentally opened up a space, and I found a maze-like place. I was trapped there for 100 years, and finally escaped unintentionally. I called it the chaotic space. I sent Celestial Master Xiao there. She was a little embarrassed," he said. "Although I used space to establish my Dao, the strangeness of that place was beyond my expectations. It was hard for me to escape for a while." Heavenly Venerate Zhao's current strength surpasses mine by an unknown number of times. He also has the corporeal body of Earth Mother Primordial Lord, so it's much easier for him to use the roots and branches of Earth Mother to break through the maze. However, if he wanted to leave from there, he would need 1 to 2 decades. There's such a place? Qin Mu exclaimed in astonishment. The universe is magnificent and strange, so there are many secrets that no one knows about. There are many strange ruins in that place, and when I came to that chaotic space back then, I was also very puzzled. She couldn't help being angry. Heavenly Venerate Mu, you're already like this now, yet you're still curious about such a dangerous place. Don't you know death? Qin Mu raised his hand to touch his head, but Heavenly Venerate you slapped it. You forgot that you have no head now. Qin Mu placed his hands on his waist, and Heavenly Venerate you was fuming with anger. When she saw the situation, she couldn't help laughing out loud. Heavenly Venerate you gave her a glance and coughed. We'd better hurry up and tidy up the Dao patterns in his Dao injuries. The longer we drag this out, the more dangerous it will be for him. Heavenly Venerate you hurriedly steadied her mind and said solemnly, You can't blame me for this. You have to blame Heavenly Venerate Mu. He always makes me laugh. Heavenly Venerate you put on the ghost face mask at the back of her head, and rolled her eyes before pushing the ghost face mask to the back of her head. The 2 Heavenly Venerates had profound eyesight after all, so they quickly sorted out the Dao markings of the Dao injuries Heavenly Venerate Xiao had left behind. However, they only knew a little about the great Dao runes contained in them. The 2 of them talked in detail with Qin Mu, and he analyzed the Dao markings bit by bit. Suddenly, his voice sounded very unhappy. Heavenly Venerate Xiao has also learned microscopic algebra. Heavenly Venerate you and Heavenly Venerate you didn't know the meaning of his words, so they didn't take it to heart. Qin Mu fell silent. Heavenly Venerate Xiao had learned microscopic algebra and reconstructed his great Dao runes, which made his cultivation so powerful that he could even fight against Earth Count, Moon, and Heavenly Venerate you alone. All of this was the effect of eternal peace reform. Heavenly Venerate Xiao being able to grasp microscopic algebra in such a short time means that he has been staying in eternal peace, and has been wholeheartedly studying the results of eternal peace reform. However, he couldn't stay in eternal peace forever, because he still had to stay in Heavenly Court. He even had to make a trip to Ancestral Court or Great Void from time to time. Qin Mu pondered over it for a moment and came to a conclusion. When I summoned his soul wasn't absorbed into Heavenly Venerate Zhao's body. Instead, his soul reincarnated and became another person, sneaking into eternal peace to secretly learn the reform. Heavenly Venerate Xiao learning eternal peace's reform wasn't out of his expectations. In fact, Qin Mu couldn't wait for 10 Heavenly Venerates to learn the results of eternal peace's reform. As long as eternal peace's reform was useful, 10 Heavenly Venerates wouldn't descend calamity to destroy eternal peace until it was a threat to them. However, what made Qin Mu wary was that Heavenly Venerate Xiao had always had an identity in eternal peace. Furthermore, over the past 10 years, this identity of his had probably climbed to the middle or upper echelons of eternal peace. In time he would be like a parasite, controlling the power of eternal peace. He might even take over the magpie's nest. He wants to stealthily steal the results of eternal peace's reform, just like how the demigods stole the power of the ancient gods in the past, just like how 10 Heavenly Venerates stole the power of the Heavenly Emperor. No matter how the world changes, the power of the rulers of the past will never fall to the side. Qin Mu thought to himself, if the power of eternal peace doesn't belong to the people of eternal peace but falls into the hands of parasites like Heavenly Venerate Xiao, eternal peace reform will fail. If that's the case, eternal peace will just be another Dragon and Han revolution. Apothecary coughed and reminded him. Muir, continue to analyze the Dao markings. Qin Mu composed himself and continued to listen to Heavenly Venerate you. And Heavenly Venerate you explain the form of each rune, while he analyzed the profoundness of these great Dao runes. After a long while, the 3 of them worked together to analyze the Dao injuries left behind by Heavenly Venerate Xiao. This time, the Dao injuries left behind by Heavenly Venerate Xiao weren't that serious. In his haste, he exploded Qin Mu's head and didn't have the time to use his full strength. Apothecary had already made his calculations and immediately prepared the medicine. He refined spirit pills and immediately healed Qin Mu's injuries. Qin Mu's Dao injuries were slowly disappearing. After a long while, Qin Mu only felt an itch on his wound. He immediately executed Overlord Body 3 elixir technique and his neck grew. Soon, a head grew out and the vertical eye in the heart of his brows appeared once again. However, this time there was no land of Qin in the vertical eye, there was no primordial eggshell, Taiji raw stone and the like. Heavenly Venerate Moon had sent back the treasures that he had dropped. Everything was there, except for the land of Qin that Heavenly Venerate Shao had shattered and the corpse of Madame Yuan Mu. At that time the situation was urgent. Heavenly Venerate Moon had only thrown the treasures that Qin Mu had dropped into another dimension, and hadn't sealed them. However, a corpse demon had been born from Madame Yuan Mu's corpse, and the corpse demon had seen the advantage. It had planned to sweep Qin Mu's treasures away and escape, but it had been scared off by the Egg of Supreme Beginning. Qin Mu didn't see the Qin continent in his vertical eye, so he could only place the treasures in his divine treasures, and throw them into the ancestral hall. The Egg of Supreme Beginning came to the sacrificial altar of the Supreme Beginning mine in his ancestral court and settled down peacefully. Qin Mu stood up and pondered for a moment. He then asked solemnly, "Heavenly Venerate you, can you find a person who was born 19 years ago in eternal peace? There should be the word Shao in his name, and his cultivation realm should have reached the realm of Venerate God or even higher." Heavenly Venerate you's heart stirred slightly, and he took out the Book of Life and Death. "I can look for him." Not long later, Heavenly Venerate you said, "I found 2 gods of eternal peace. One is called Shao Tianji, and the other is called Shao Chujue." Qin Mu looked at the 2 eternal peace gods in the Book of Life and Death and sniffed their souls. He then took out the divine bow of the strong practitioners of the prehistoric era and pulled it open with all his might, pointing the arrow to the east. In the east, the sun rose and the sky became bright.